I am pleased to introduce our first speakers of NaRCAD 2024, who have traveled all the way from Arizona. Woohoo! Anaid Gonsalves and Dave Watt. Anaid is a research program manager for several projects at Arizona State University's Southwest Interdisciplinary Research Center. She has a background in prevention and working with Spanish-speaking populations in Arizona and Mexico. Dave is a senior academic detailer at Detailing Improves Sexual Health, DISH, at Arizona State University in partnership with the Arizona Department of Health and Human Services. Dave has a background in teaching and is the founder of an anti-stigma campaign, Team Friendly, and has presented content and hosted hundreds of awareness events on how to fight HIV stigma in friendly ways. Please welcome Anaid and Dave.
Should we do a mic check with this as well? Is it working at home?
Nope.
Are people at home hearing my mic, or should I use your mic just to be sure?
How are we doing, people at home? Are we sounding okay?
Yeah. All right.
They're good. Looks like we're ready to go. Hi, I'm Dave, that's Anaid, just in case you're
Hello.
wondering. So we have no conflicts to declare? And I can do it. There we go.
All right. So just really quickly, I want to talk about our partnership. So we work for Arizona State University, Southwest Interdisciplinary Research Center, which is a research center based in the School of Social Work. And we partner with the Arizona Department of Health Services. The ADHS, is what we call them, provides our detailing team and the know-how and all the knowledge, and the ASU team brings their evaluation and research background to help with the DISH AZ program.
So yes, Rocco and I have 2 offices, 2 cubicles, 2 parking places, 2 team meetings every week. It's wonderful. We love it.
Love it.
So this is us.
Yeah, so Anaid Gonsalves, my pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I'm a program manager of research at CERC, and I've been there for going on 10 years now.
And my name is Dave Watt, pronouns are he, they, and former middle school math teacher. So thank you for all sitting down and looking at me. Yeah. And I know it's not a middle school classroom because those little spherical balls, nobody's throwing them at each other. Thank you.
Later.
I'm also the founder of the Team Friendly campaign, so it warms my heart to see it's also Mr. Friendly on X, aka Twitter. So we'll be tweeting throughout this conference as well. So say hi.
Yeah.
The campaign is a plus and a minus sign on a smiling face to show support for people of any HIV status. So that's my background for the last 20 years working in the field of HIV. I share with my husband's permission. He's living with HIV and I'm on PrEP. So we are a serodiscordant couple. We prefer to call it a magnetic couple. So that's a lot of my background, and my passion drives my passion for what I do. And we are not alone in this team. So Rocco is in the house. He's presenting with me today, is our team lead. Dr. Kevin Carmichael, Dr. C, having a provider on our team is great because he's got like 30 plus years of HIV experience.
Yeah.
And Ryan is also in the house and works a lot with our team.
And then Dr. Maria Aguilar Maya is our principal investigator at CERC at our ASU side.
So this is our objectives. When we're working on the title, like if anybody has ever done like cold calls are awesome, and if anybody presented on that, I would love to see that slide deck. Because we find that does not work very well. So we spend a lot of time actually on how to not do cold calls. How do we get in the door for nude AD sessions? And that's kind of where this whole deck came from. So we wanted to figure that out and kind of spend some time talking about that together. And hopefully this is going to inspire you to find new ways as well. And then Anaid is going to talk about how to measure it, because that's what we really want to do is, are we being successful? And see if you can apply these to your own team.
And really quickly, I just want to talk about our office at ASU. We have a partnership, well, we do partnerships with all sorts of nonprofits and other like city, state, county, tribal governments. And we do evaluation and dissemination. And so one of our main partnerships is with the Arizona Department of Health Services. We have several projects with them. And ultimately, all of our work is rooted in our mission of preventing and eliminating health disparities.
So when I talk about people about academic detailing, like I love the details. So we're going to talk about details with people like making lists and Google Docs and shared information. And the academia side is you're going to get a survey and we're going to evaluate those surveys. So our team is called DISH-AZ. We love an acronym and we also love food. So we love this acronym, Detailing for Improved Sexual Health. And we like to think of it in 3 ways, is that we connect, which is what we're very much what we're doing here, educate and support. And when we talk about education, we like to emphasize that it's not just, hey, we know it all and we're going to teach you. It is very much, hey, we're going to collectively work on some documents together on best practices for people who are considering prep, what are actual stories from the field. So that's a great way to get in the door, is saying like, hey, would you like to be part of developing best practices here in Arizona? You know, and so people want to be part of something. Hey, would you like to see what your peers have said on this topic? And here I am as a detailer, I'm just typing it all up for you, you know? And that's how we can offer support. So we look for ways to support people. We'll talk about that a bit more. And we have a poll for you. Just a quickie. When you get a call from an unknown caller on your phone, what do? Do you answer the call? You never know. Do you ignore the call, let it go to voicemail? It could be, you know, could be Publishers Clearinghouse. And, or is it, I'm gonna like hit end because I don't want to interrupt my day?
Or you could do what I do. Sometimes I'll just like copy the number really fast, put it into Google and see if anything comes up like, is it spam? If my phone doesn't say it's spam, usually it is.
We have a lot of people letting it go to voicemail, which is great because we don't want to miss a call, right? We might be getting a call from somebody that we don't have saved in our phone, somebody we made a connection with, so that's why we came up with that poll. Cool.
Cool. All right, so I'm just going to give a little overview of our what the team has been up to this past year. From 2023 and 2024, we've had a lot of one-on-one or small group sessions. This year so far, 165 of those. We've unique providers that we have detailed with. In 2023, it was 146, and this year, so far, we're at 328. And a lot of those are repeat. We get a lot of repeat people, so I think that's a really impressive number. For group sessions, we haven't done as many this year, but last year we had 750 attendees at our larger group sessions, and this year we've had 188. But we've done a lot more smaller and one-on-one this year. And so after all the sessions, we send a satisfaction survey to have the providers give us feedback. They can request materials from the team. We have a lot of really lovely materials on all the topics that the team details on. And they can request additional sessions on all the topics that we detail on as well. Oop.
Did you hit it?
Yeah, I did.
You did it?
So a little bit about our survey, just really quickly. We completely remade our survey this year, and so we started this in June. This is just from May and June. For this year, we had 73 unique surveys so far, and you can see that a lot of those, 61% of them, are people who've had a second visit or later, and this scale. For, let's see, the AD session provided me with useful information. We asked like specific things that they would have learned in that session based on whatever topic it is. It'll be like, provided me with useful information on how to assess, like for sexual history taking or how to prescribe PrEP. And so we have a pretty high satisfaction score on that, 4.75 on a scale of 5. We also ask how supported they feel from other academic detailers, and you can see we have a really good score there so far, 9.8. So we're working on trying to get more surveys. Our response rate is a little bit lower, but we've had really good scores.
So we don't just do one-on-one sessions. we find that it really helps us get in the door is doing a small group session. So we like to do a small group, make a lot of personal connections. Hey, we like Dave, we like Rocco, they're nice people. Yes, I'll meet with them one-on-one. So we have, Ryan developed a little sign-up sheet so people can leave a one-on-one session with an academic details session ready to go. So yes, Calendly is cool, but what we really like is we schedule them based on their schedule, not when we have openings. So we kind of make that work really, really well. We also, whenever we do a presentation, I give shout outs to any other topics that we can detail on. So we give shout outs to, hey, gender affirming care. We mention it, but we can't cover it, but we gonna give lots of teasers. Anytime we give a little one-on-one, like a one-on-one future, we wanna set them up in those small sessions. So when to present? So we don't even have a budget for jelly beans. Okay, so we like to go after Gilead. Oh, Gilead's coming in and giving you lunch? Oh, we'll come in right after Gilead. So while you're finishing lunch, you're already there, you know, finish your lunch, eat your cookie, and have your coffee while we continue. So we kind of pick up where they left off. There we go. Oh, I gotta give the CME credits. That's another one. We got permission to do CME credits with Dr. C doing DoxyPep. And DoxyPep has been a great way, oh, this is the latest information, we give CME credits for that, then people everybody wants to go to those, right? Which is really cool. So within our small group presentations, we get to know people, and we go in there not just like, hey, this is what we're gonna provide. We go in there with an eye on, what would we do better? Let's look at this agency. Let's look at their space in their office. Let's learn about their programs, and we kind of think about what would we do better? Between Rocco and I, we've got like 40 years of experience in the field of HIV. So when we're visiting people's offices or just visiting an outreach table, what are some of those gaps? What are they missing? How can we help? And at my age, like, how can I still be relevant? I want to be relevant. I want to be really helpful to these people. So this is what we want to make sure we do. For example, we found that a lot of people are doing fentanyl test strips. Nobody had an English and Spanish brochure. We couldn't even find one online. So what we did is we worked together and developed one. It did not take us that long. But holy cow, is this giving us traction for getting us in the door to pray, hey, we have a fentanyl test strip trifold that we developed. It's in English and Spanish. We will change the name to Cochise Harm Reduction. We'll change, you can have your name put on that flyer. So this is an example of what we do to connect and support you, because that's gonna lead to more academic detail sessions. Hey, I've got this brochure. I did this for you. It took me 2 seconds on Canva. But it feels so personal.
It looks really nice.
Oh, and another poll.
Oop.
So what I'd like you to do is to grab a sheet of paper. What expert topics can you present on? What's unique to you that might get your foot in the door? So what's a hot topic? If you got a little pad of paper right there, take a second and think of what's really unique. Like for us, we call DoxyPep our gateway drug, because we call DoxyPep, it gets in the door to get us into like what's new from the CDC. This is lately approved.
These are really good.
Yep, it's been really
Menopause. No, the answers.
the answers.
Stigma. Yeah, inclusive language. Polypharmacy.
Drugs for obesity.
Ooh, pediatric depression.
Cool.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Making the most of the conference, to table or not to table, we spend a lot of time making sure a conference is worth. So Anaid is more the type of person, I want to staff the table. Rocco and I like work the room and make connections and business cards. And we also like to do presentations wherever possible. I like to do business cards with selfies. So this is me. I get a selfie, then I take a picture of their card. So I'm not just stuck with a stack of cards or a bunch of them. I can email them a picture of us in that personal connection. They're like, oh, I remember who you are. It's pretty cool. Oh, you're taking a picture of that? You're taking a picture of me taking a picture of somebody else? Nice. So to table to table, we do lots of conferences. When asked, hey, Rocco, which one should we go to? Like, anywhere we can go to. We present a lot at conferences.
Yeah, so this year we've tabled so far at 5.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. And we have presented at 30 conferences in the past year and a half. And we've done 89 different topics at conferences or small group presentations. So our group is busy.
We like to be busy. So getting our name out there, community of practice. Ryan is going to be doing a workshop on how to develop your own community of practice so that you're not just the expert in the room, you're gathering and you're meeting other people of experts. We put out a weekly newsletter. I highly recommend. You can find it on our social media. I do a New Year card for everybody. I send that out to everybody, and I don't just blanket BCC everybody. I send them individually and name them and try to come up with something personal. And we got a lot of traffic out that because honestly, we don't do much detail work between the holidays, but we're busy during the holidays doing that. So we like to participate in statewide organizations. I asked Rocco, how many statewide organizations do we participate in? And Rocco's response was, all of them. So we have somebody, if there is a statewide organization, somebody from our team is on it.
Yep. Yeah, and then just a couple more numbers about how we get our name out there. We joined the community of practices. Our weekly newsletter that Dave mentioned has more than 4,000 subscribers. And we have a networking list that we keep, after the conferences or whatever, we'll put the names of people that we networked with and we want to contact. So far we have 135 people that we made contact with at conferences or different meetings. And they even send out Happy New Year e-card, which I think is really sweet.
We do. So that is our team. Take a look at, take a screenshot of that QR code. That is the link to our newsletter, 4,000 plus subscribers. It is a great newsletter. Thank you. Pulling out your phones.
Yeah, and it's not just Arizona, a lot of it, some of it is Arizona specific, but a lot of it is just general, information that anyone would want to have.
Awesome. So that is our team. We hope to meet with you the rest of this, and thank you all for being so friendly.
Yay!
Awesome job. You can keep that mic. We are going to do Q&A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't leave the stage quite yet. If there's anyone in Boston with questions, we have Brindette and Rachel that will be going around the room. And anyone virtually, we would love your questions in the chat box. All right, Brindette, Mike has a question.
Thanks, that was wonderful. You mentioned getting those follow-up visits. I'm curious, have you started to know any observations, sort of more qualitatively, on how things change from the first to the second visit? When we train people, we often talk about the first visit is kind of breaking the ice, introducing yourself, and we anticipate that maybe the conversation will change as you get to a second or even a third visit. What trends do you see when you are getting those follow-up visits?
Yeah, we're finding that when we get their foot in the door, we're doing a presentation. The follow-up visits are where, to me, the best things happen, is because they're coming back to us with how can we help you? And so it's really led by exactly what they want. So that's, I think, why we do so much follow-up, is because, hey, they like us, we got our foot in the door, and then they have questions for us. So it's really client-led what our follow-up sessions are about.
Dave. Trish, did I see you raise your hand? Okay. Brindette or Rachel, right in this middle table here. Trish, do you mind raising your hand again so they can find you? Thank you.
Hi, Trish.
Hi, so amazing presentation. I was really excited by the strategies you outlined for how to turn presentations with a group into individual visits. Do you have any particular observations on what works best when you're sort of analyzing the group you're going into, suggesting things that could do better? How do you what's the best way to get people to sign up for that one-on-one?
So throughout the presentation, when we're doing a slide deck, I'd like to do teasers, and I do these little pop-ups. Oh, you want to learn more about FC2s, internal condoms, or you want to learn more about, so we just boom, and I refer to that sign-up sheet throughout. So hey, you want to take some notes on, hey, we also I mentioned DoxyPep. or a mention gender affirming care. And I'm going to give Ryan a shout out for something that, so like we give lots of shout outs to give teasers because we don't want to present on everything. We only have an hour or we only have 45 minutes. But we want to leave them hungry for more information on what we're good at.
That's amazing, thanks. And further to that, what sorts of things do you identify in an organization where they could be doing better? Like you mentioned the trifold, which is great. How do you kind of figure out what you're going to suggest for that?
One of my favorites is how to make your space welcoming. Everybody wants to have a welcoming space, or they say they're welcoming. Oh, we are welcoming. Well, how do you show that you're welcoming? So within seconds, people can walk into your clinic or your office and decide whether or not this is a welcoming space. So we have a whole detail session on like, hey, would you like some tips on, I have some ideas on how to make your space more welcoming. Nobody has ever said, no, I don't want to hear those ideas, For example, and I'll give it a great example, is if you only had PrEP posters on your walls, what about the people who are living with HIV? What does that say? Well, we're only funded to do PrEP. I'm like, that's great. I'm glad you're funded to do PrEP. But how about linkage to care? Is your staff trained to do linkage to care? And every time they're going to say yes, because if they test somebody positive, they're going to link them to care. So I said, well, let's also put up posters for linkage to care as well. Let's put up positive posters about undetectable as untransmittable, and we can help connect you with great posters for that too. So that's kind of what we look for, but we kind of want to emphasize what they're good at and how to show that they're good at it.
Fantastic, thanks.
Thanks, Trish, for that question. We have time for one more. I don't see any questions in the virtual audience. I see a hand over here. Thank you, Rachel.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. Just kind of wondering, how did you structure your not giant-sized program to do 89 different topics?
Well, I'll say really fast, like some of those topics are, like under one big umbrella topic, like maybe like HIV care, and then under that we have specific things like PrEP, doxy-PrEP, or what are the other ones that we have? Stigma, undetectable.
Yeah. So we break down our topics very specifically, which I think is what helps is we have a lot of details in what we present on. So even if somebody has like a basic knowledge of HIV, for example, we know there's a lot more to it than that. Like we'll do a detailed session on exactly how do you give a reactive result. Not just how to interpret a result, but what are some of the best practices on that? And that document alone has been continual development for over 2 years on all these tips and tricks on how to give a reactive result. So our documents continue to build. And then little tangents of what people are experiencing, we've got a certain number of people on PrEP that say no to PrEP, but we get frustrated because we want them to be on PrEP, but they're not on PrEP. So we've worked on stories. We're now collecting stories of why people said no to PrEP that would be a really good candidate for PrEP. So we've developed all those stories and motivational interviewing techniques on how to answer to those stories so that people are more set up to succeed for those office visits. Does that help?
Thank you, and thank you to Anaid and Dave. Big round of applause. All right. All right, way to kick off our conference with just some creativity that we've come to expect from DISH. Those of you who are going to join their breakout, you will be in for a treat. All right, next up we have a presenter who is new to presenting at NaRCAD, but certainly not new to academic detailing. Jeremy Sussman works in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and he's a physician researcher. Also, he is the principal investigator of MIDAS, which is a VA project, MIDAS query, that he's going to speak to you in great detail about. We're always so excited to have representation from the VA, and for those of you VA folks at home cheering him on, Sarah, Melissa, Dana, just so happy that you're supporting his work virtually. And Jeremy, we're so glad to have you. Come on up.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me here. I don't know who put me after that team. That was really great. Now I'm duly intimidated, so I appreciate it. And once again, the project we're going to be talking about is exploring VA academic detailers' experiences and needs in process improvement. We'll get into what that means. We have no conflicts of interest to declare and no relevant financial or non-financial relationships. Acknowledgements, yes, that is a busy slide. This was a big team. This was a great project. We had a lot of help from a lot of people. The Midas team, as we'll talk about more, includes a combination of investigators, qualitative analysts, improvement coaches, academic detailers, and project managers who've been working on this in this space for quite a while now. And we now have a long-term partnership with the VA Academic Detailing Service, who unfortunately cannot be here today in person, but are here virtually. Melissa, Dana, Sarah, Chad, Kay, Mark have all been incredibly helpful, working with us for many years now. Thanks. So, academic structure here, I'm sorry, I need to train that out of me and give a more enlivening background. I see that now. For background, again, we're all working with the VA here. The Department of Veterans Affairs is the largest managed care system in America. Depending on how you count it, up to 10 or 12 million people are VA patients. The VA Academic Detailing Service is one of the largest academic detailing services in America. So, before we get into details, we'll start with the slide. Should detailers formally engage in process improvement? We'll talk about what we mean by that in more detail later, but a nice little start to begin with. This will be clear as we go. You're allowed to say no, just because it's what the topic's about. Totally fine. And you'll see people do have mixed emotions, so. All right, numbers are slowing down. That's interesting, thanks. And we'll get back to what we mean here. So the Midas program is a 5-year project funded through VA in which VA investigators and applied quality improvement scientists are working together. We're trying to improve use of a variety of different evidence-based practices with 2 separate focuses. One is going to be a quality improvement learning program. We're teaching VA employees about quality improvement and process improvement. Another is that we ourselves are doing academic detailing. So this is aligning 2 things we've been working on separately for the last few years. When we say process improvement, we're talking about any practices that improve operations by making specific processes faster, more reliable, and or more efficient. Changes that can help people get things done to the process of what's going on. You want to put in your head that this is often used mechanisms like Lean or Six Sigma, which you may have heard of, or approaches like plan, do, study, act cycles, where you try to recognize something that's not going right where you're working and make an organized change in helping it go better. And the thing that we walked into for this is the basic idea that detailing cannot help a broken process. We had a project where we were trying to encourage providers to refer to a clinic that was getting fewer referrals than we'd liked. One of the sites had a problem where people weren't making the referral, but also the consult form, the actual referral that you make, had a bug and was actually a dead link. So literally people would place the consult and would go to a black hole. You can't detail your way out of that. No one knew they were making the consult. Detailing can't help a broken process. And of course, detailers are often the ones who know the things that are going poorly better than anyone. You're talking to your providers, you're talking to people day in, day out, saying, why are you having a hard time doing this, how can we help? And often they come up with problems that are not solvable in the process of the detailing session, but the detailer is the person who recognizes can be solved. And what ends up happening is we've learned anecdotally that many detailers are doing process improvement, often because they feel they need to, just to get the basic detailing done. Which of course raises the question, what is the role of process improvement in detailing? What can it be? So our aims then, 1, evaluate what and how much process improvement academic detailers through the VA Academic Detailing Service are already doing. 2, figure out the barriers and facilitators to doing that process improvement. What's making it easy? What's making it hard? What's getting in their way? And also work with VA Academic Detailing Service to develop plans to support process improvement for detailers who feel it's appropriate for them. Our methods then, first thing is we just got a sense of the lay of the land and what people thought could change. We did in-depth semi-structured interviews with 22 detailers. Some were new, some were experienced, and we talked to supervisors also. We also reviewed some existing data that we realized existed all along. One was a VA Academic Detailing Service internal database. This was the Salesforce database, an internal database from 10 random VA detailers. We also looked at a VA-wide database of larger process improvement projects. This was a general one that was not done by Academic Detailing Service. We looked to see when details were showing up in the national database that existed. We looked at the ADS Teams campaign channel. So again, the Academic Detailing Service has a lot of communication between the existing detailers that often happens nationally through Teams channels, and we looked at some of those channels. They also have what are called chit-chat calls, where they work together to figure out what's happening on their campaigns, what are they doing to make their campaigns as effective as possible, and we reviewed the recordings from some of those calls, which were, again, automatically transcribed because everything's virtual. Everything's virtual, of course, because ADS is a national organization working in a lot of places. So, are detailers doing process improvement work? In our interviews, 81% said yes, they have engaged in some amount of this. The Academic Detailing internal database, this is just the Salesforce database where you say how you're spending your time, listed 2,500 times where detailers said they were doing something that resembled process improvement. And this database of larger PI projects that's documented through a different source, about 25% of all detailers at least showed up in those larger projects that were out of scope of a detailing campaign. How much time are detailers spending on the process improvement? Of those who said yes, they were estimating on the order of 10%. That amount did vary by campaign phase, but it was difficult to isolate from other roles, in part because, again, this is not an explicit part of their job. And I want to emphasize this is not judgmental in either direction, because in fact, right now, there is no universal expectation of doing work like this, but there's also an understanding that if you got to get something done, you should get it done. So what the right amount is completely unknown. What kind of process improvements are detailers making then? The one that stuck out as most common was some sort of technology or medical records improvement. Adapting order note templates, order sets, ordering menus, things like that that can just make it easier for people to do what they're trying to do anyway. Some were developing written materials that could include things like standard operating procedures, which can help the detailing to know exactly what people should be doing, working on protocols, working on patient education materials. And then there also was some direct patient or provider education that didn't fit directly into what they consider their detailing role, such as workshops or social media campaigns. What do we find for this? Well, first we found process improvement works best when the detailer is well integrated into their site. If you're someone who doesn't work there and just shows up at a doctor's office and tells them how to change what they're doing, that's obviously not going to go over well. Within VA, a lot of our detailers are local pharmacists, we call packed pharmacists, who know the site very, very well and therefore have a lot of personal authority and respect already from their pharmacy job. You also have to have leadership support. Obviously, no one can just walk in and start changing a computer program, and so you have to have something where your site leadership, both at the detailing level and at the clinical level, agree why this matters and that you should be spending your time on this. And you have to have some amount of flexibility in your detailing work. Some detailers have more oversight on exactly how they spend the minute to make sure every minute is detailing. Some have a little more flexibility to try to get done what they need to get done. One of the quotes we had just emphasizes that when doing this sort of work, you have to be persistent and you need a good team with motivated stakeholders. You can't do this alone. So, do detailers want this? Do they want to be doing process improvement? Most of ours said yes, they do want some involvement, although there were clear hesitations. One was a question about PI being within scope. Being a really great detailer is hard enough on its own. To learn other skills, do other things, obviously is just adding something new. There was concern this would lead to less time to prepare for the core detailing activities. And there was a lot of talk about whether this is part of their performance plan. If you're getting paid based on how many detailing sessions you do, you're not going to want to come up with things that are outside of those core detailing sessions. If you're getting a lot of oversight where your boss is saying how many sessions are you doing, extra time-consuming things can be complicated for that. This is another way where it really needs to be an organizational decision and not something a detailer can do on their own. But then there were a lot of questions of where to start and how to do it. Some detailers really felt this was quite a problem. There are so many directions I could go with process improvement. It's just figuring out where. The other thing that came through loud and clear is that if you're going to encourage detailers to be doing more process improvement and fixing what's going on in the clinic when possible, the detailers wanted support. This wasn't just a matter of learning the core skills like the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles, like the fishbone diagrams that we do like teaching. They really wanted people. They wanted start-to-finish project help where they could check in with others. They wanted ability to learn from others and other detailers who are also doing similar projects. They did want some amount of individualized instruction to make sure that if you're going to be spending your time trying to make a process change, others agree this is the change that's needed. And perhaps most concerningly, this is time consuming. They needed dedicated time. Which brought us back to where we were. In conclusion, many detailers already are engaging in process improvement. Many of them have to, just to do the thing they're trying to engage in. More want to, and they feel they have insights about what changes need to happen in a site. But yes, if they want to do that, they do need some amount of support. So that's where we're now. Thank you.
Right, we have plenty of time for Q&A. Would love to see who in the audience here would like to ask a question. Anyone have any thoughts or reflections about Jeremy's presentation? We always have Mike in my back pocket, but if you're tired of Mike. All right, Mike, I'm going to throw it to you and then we'll turn it to the virtual audience.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. That was really helpful. The process question's really interesting because we know there's a lot of inefficiency, a lot of opportunity to improve in medical practice. I think sort of the more, we're in my primary care clinic hat, the more broad-based you are, like in primary care, the harder it is to do things efficiently because you're doing so many things. And it's because of that so many things that I wonder about whether your own reflections as you've looked at the data or things you heard qualitatively about how people strike that right balance. The process, once you start improving processes, it could be sort of, let's fix all the referrals, let's fix all the prescribing. Yeah. But presumably if you're a detailer, you're actually charged with, let's order, we want more referrals for colon cancer screening, we want more prescriptions for PrEP, whatever our clinical mandate is. And we're a little bit, it's okay if the other processes are broken. We know there's a clinical need we need to fill. How do you think about sort of that tension for detailers so that they can feel productive and not feel like they need to take on sort of a massive task? It feels like a real tension, even in a closed system like the VA.
Absolutely, it's a massive tension. It's a massive tension in general whenever you're giving someone a new role. So the push and pull of, one thing that happens for anyone who's done a QI project is they're 20 times harder than you expect them to be. And so you have to come up with something that's much smaller than you think you need, and it ends up taking a lot longer. And to be able to do this and not have it be a diversion from your core job, and it really has to be a secondary thing. You're hired to be a detailer, has to be prevented. One thing for that, of course, is that this has to happen in teams. And so while we're saying what's the role of the detailers, they have to integrate with the site. They have to have, that's why they want the coach appropriately. They wanted some amount of support in knowing what's a reasonable scale, what's a reasonable scope. And I can tell you by far the biggest thing that goes wrong is people do projects that are bigger than they think, than they actually can handle because it seems so much easier than it ends up being. And so yes, I think making sure that there are people who you work with as oversight, making sure that this is going the right direction, and having something like a process improvement coach, at least to touch base with, to make sure that we're staying at the right spot, not having scope creep, not having time creep, are important, particularly at the beginning. And so I think a matter of checks and balances ends up being very important.
Excellent. And we have a comment here just to share. It's not a question, but just loving the PI work. Darla Peterson is sharing, we sometimes conduct it, such as how offices are conducting syphilis screening.
Syphilis screening, sorry, I'm a clinician here, or clinics not conducting extravaginal testing, etc. Wondering if you have any last reflections, Jeremy? It's a little quiet. People are getting their copy into their systems. Oh, we do have one question here from Nicole Seymour. Wonderful.
I watched it too, Monty. See, I got in trouble. So. Excuse me, sorry. Exactly.
Thanks for an excellent discussion. I'm curious, have you ever had evaluation wrapped into any of the process improvement, or was that a part of your review and being able to capture some of the outcomes related to that in your program?
we are keeping up as we go along, and we're trying to look for sort of clinical impacts, which are hard of the size we're going with. And we also are tracking the size and scope of the projects. One of the things, again, as we mentioned, is sort of keep a sense of what's achievable and what isn't, and on what time scale is actually probably the hardest thing we're struggling with. And similarly, again, these process evaluations are necessary along the way. Do you lose a lot of folks? You know, it's certainly in the last few years with everyone being burned out and over busy. Our hardest problem has been getting people who feel they have the time to learn the processes and learn what's going on. Once they're doing it, they generally end up pretty excited about what's going on. But it is hard to convince people like, yes, you know, what you need is another hat right now. So.
All right, questions are coming in. Here we go, and
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering if, I don't know if it's part of the project, but were you able to, did you implement anything or make any changes based on like some of these things that you found from the qualitative data?
Yeah, and I didn't go towards this, but in fact, you know, so again, the project that we've been doing for a while is we run a program called LEAP, where essentially we train VA employees on a program that kind of resembles a Six Sigma yellow belt, if you don't, well, no, so yeah, yellow belt, if you remember that. So a small, relatively low level training that is still a decent amount of content that we teach them over the course of 6 months with a coach. And this is the process that we've been doing all along. For the academic detailing service, the sense was the detailers probably didn't have as much time as was needed for that program because it was quite a bit of time. And so we have been working with them to try to create something that fits their needs better. And in fact, what we're going to be trying out, we hope in April right now, will be a sort of new curriculum that we've devised that's quite a bit lower on the content. And so again, the initial one did have a lot of fishbone diagrams and that sort of thing. And we're still going to do that, but we're going to cut back on that a little bit. And we will have a cohort model where the people who are receiving the training are all going to be detailers working on matching projects so they can talk with one another. And our improvement coach will be sort of following along with them. And so that project hopefully will start in April to work with detailers on sort of a more formal training. And also a lot of it is just a constant sense of what is the cultural approval for this and not. And that's something that we're, you know, ADS is always working on internally, and we work with that too.
all right, we have a question from Vishal.
So thanks so much for a great presentation. Question, kind of in your experience doing this, how significant do you feel geography is with creating a performance improvement plan? So like looking at, you know, whether things differ region to region that you're looking at or program to program.
Yeah, I mean, this is hard. And certainly, again, I think the VA-ness of it's complicated. There's a sense within VA, you know, we say one VA is one VA. On the other hand, there's more similarities within VA than there is between a community health center and an academic medical center. And I think a huge amount of it's personal, as much as the geography is, do the people know each other? What's the culture of going on within that group? Ends up reflecting itself in the geography, but often it really is like, what's your relationship with your team at your locality, which itself is geographic in that way.
Hello, Zach from Canada here. My question has deteriorated into a closed answer question, I'm afraid. Because you sort of answered it when you were talking to Mike. But I was just curious about the improvement for the sake of improvement versus improvement that's really steering in a particular direction. So the VA obviously has vision and mission and strategy. Academic detailing itself has a mission and a vision. But I was curious if your program, it's now why it's a closed-ended question. Curious if your program has a specific vision and mission that would give that direction or helps align the leaders who are overseeing the various improvement projects.
Interesting. It doesn't feel closed-ended to me at all. Essentially, the way our program is working is, you know, the vision was see what happens if you train folks about process improvement. And then we separately had the academic detailing arm, and each one is in service of an individual program. So in this case, you know, we did 3 randomized trials. We're academics, we like to randomize things. One was about encouraging use of CBT for insomnia. We did another one about safer use of DOAC prescribing. And so the idea was they're already aligned with things that had their own mission on their own. And so in that respect, you know, Lord knows, like we had primary outcomes in that way that academics do. And so that was our mission, was to, you know, achieve the clinical goal. And that, if that fits your answer, I think going forward for this in particular, the point is to have the projects aligned with the academic detailing services campaigns. And so they tend to do 1 or 2 national campaigns per year, while at the local level, people are doing things on their own. But I think the idea is, and I think this helps with Michael's question too, of trying to constrain what you're doing, where the idea will be you're doing a campaign about a topic, you're running into problems, you think some of those might be achievable by process change, you help to do it. And I think that should try to achieve some of that vision.
Anybody else? Oh, we have Paul from Alosa. Oh, hold on. Let us get you the mic so the people at home can hear you.
Thank you. Can you just talk about aligning priorities and how do you do that? What's the best way to try to accomplish that?
I think that's going to be local to the project. I think, the main key to aligning priorities tends to be working on a team. If you make sure that if a detailer is spending a lot of time on something, there are people who know quality improvement, who think this is not going to run into walls, and there are also people within the detailing program who feel that way also. Because this is definitely something where the push and pull can be difficult. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if it does. All right. All right. And once again, I want to thank my team on all this. The ADS have been great partners, and we've had a large team within the Midas program, been doing a lot of work for a long time now to try to think through these issues. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. What a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Jeremy. All right. I am going to introduce our next 2 speakers. It is my pleasure to introduce NaRCAD Caballas and Dima Chitani from Illinois. NaRCAD is the Assistant Director of Academic Detailing at the University of Illinois, Chicago. She is a clinical pharmacist and certified rehabilitation counselor. NaRCAD's career spans over 25 years, with 13 years in management roles, and includes a strong focus on mental health. Dima is a clinical pharmacist and clinical instructor in the Department of Pharmacy Practice at the University of Illinois, Chicago College of Pharmacy. In her academic detailing role, she leads the social media team and is a clinical content co-coordinator. Please welcome NaRCAD and Dima, our wonderful colleagues from Illinois Advance.
All right. Thank you, Anna, and the NaRCAD team. It is great to be back here in Boston. Great to be back here with this NaRCAD community. I'm going to jump right into the presentation. So as you can see, disclosures, we have no conflicts of interest, no relationships of any concern. So last year, I was here on stage presenting on one of Illinois Advance's programs, and we briefly highlighted this idea of every step tells a story. We were talking about building brand awareness, but looking at it from the customer perspective. How do we draw in those healthcare professionals, those providers, this idea of the story brand and the hero's journey? Today, what I'm going to be talking about is delving a little bit more deeply into how did we implement those concepts. So looking at how can, not only how our program did it, but how your programs as well can maximize those recruitment efforts, marketing efforts to your program's full potential. So in the spirit of the football season, marketing recruitment entails a series of plays, and you often have to adjust and change the playbook throughout the game. So you may get sacked 9 times by the Patriots team. You may score a field goal. And if you hit the sweet spot, you may just get that touchdown. So Illinois Advance has spent a few years building the foundation of our program, establishing it, et cetera. Now we're in the era of let's expand those roots. What can we do? So we, as you see here in this diagram, we had a group of pharmacist detailers who they love taking on challenges. So they're like, let's explore the world of marketing, even though we don't really have much experience with it. Part of what we were doing was shifting our focus from the needs of Illinois Advance to the needs of the prescriber and the healthcare organizations. As Anna mentioned, we're affiliated with the University of Illinois, Chicago. Finally dawned on us, there's a lot of university resources that we can utilize at no expense. So we reached out to marketing students and were able to gain some insight from them on helpful strategies, tools, things we can do to improve our promotional materials and things. We completely revolutionized our website, which we'll talk about in a little bit, increasing our physical presence at conferences and events, whether we are presenters or vendors, exhibitors at booths. And lastly, implementing a more structured outreach plan and program. So because I was told from our staff that they love doing cold calls so much, they were like, you know what, I'm going to approach you with this whole new idea of outreach. So we took on an adventure in outreach. And with this, we utilized basically let's call it a three-pronged structure that involved discovery, follow-up, and provider relations. And we dispersed these categories amongst the staff. So with the discovery group, they do a bulk of the research, the legwork. Their goals are to identify the opportunities and identify the people who we can contact in order to try and obtain visits. One of their other goals is to find out through their research what's an individualized aspect of a particular organization, what are their target goals and their needs, and how can Illinois Advance fit in with that. With the follow-up group, their job is to ensure that no connections fall through the cracks. We get tons of emails, we get tons of job responsibilities. It's very easy to kind of forget, oh, I need to reach out to this person, or I haven't heard back from them in a while. So the follow-up group maintains the communication. Similar concept others have talked about with persistence, being able to be persistent and not give up, getting those lack of responses or the rejections, keep on trying, keep on pushing through. So what we learned is with the persistent outreach, eventually we can get a response. If we make an outreach attempt every 3 to 6 weeks, maybe by the 4th, 5th attempt, we get a response. That idea of putting your name out there, putting your face out there, hopefully they don't get tired of you. They eventually express some interest, and then we can do our thing to pave the way to getting an AD visit. And then lastly, we have the provider relations group. This group is the face of Illinois Advance. They're the ones who are actively pursuing those networking opportunities that the discovery and follow-up groups have established and built, taking those individualized aspects from the organization and executing that needs assessment with the particular organization, and then doing whatever they need to implement the next steps to obtain the AD visits. So they can have meetings, presentations with prescribers, with pharmacists, with the executive leadership team, or administrative team, etc. Now, I also realize standing in front of you that Illinois Advance has a very, very robust team. And so this may not seem feasible or realistic for some of the smaller AD programs, but in actuality, really what it is just kind of focusing on these 3 core components of the outreach structure and adapting that to your smaller programs, whether you have 5 or 1, however many on your team. Because it's really just about the quality of it, the efforts and the work that you're doing versus the quantity and the volume of it. You can modify timelines for each step of the process, things like that. So in conjunction with our new outreach strategy, we also made some adjustments to our promotional materials. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the different promotional materials that we have done utilized in the past year. This one here, you see our postcards using snail mail and stamps. So with postcards, our idea was to address the needs of the rural health communities or some of those organizations that only provided us with their office addresses. With this, we also, again, took the key component of this particular county health department and focusing on their key issues as a way to grab their attention and like they really care about us. They're looking at what our organization is about. We also have these mini sample brochures that we have at booths and conferences. It's basically like a little booklet. It's intended to serve as a teaser into our full educational materials, or brochures as we call them. So here's a little sample. You want a little more, schedule a visit with us, come talk to us. With our flyers, we learned lessening the volume of text, adding more relevant clinical messages. So in this one, we have a quote here from the Illinois Department of Public Health, dosing guidance on medication-assisted recovery. Also adding personalized imagery. Dima's going to talk about that in a little bit. Incorporating technology, QR codes, our website information, and all of our social media information as well. And these all have clickable links that you can just click on and get to the site. This is our clinical content hub. Really, this was just an idea to organize all of our AD topics into categories, allowing for an improved flow of visits when perhaps providers may have more time available for multiple topics. It can also appeal to providers who may have specific interests. So like if they have particular work with infectious diseases or chronic disease states, they see we have all these different topics within that one broad category. One of the biggest things we did this past year was completely revamping our website. We developed a platform that is more user-friendly, much easier to navigate, featuring some of the more pertinent components. We also you can kind of see here, we added a video clip to our website and looking to add a few more. As we learned from one of the past NaRCAD events, the human attention span has decreased from like 12 seconds to 8, which is less than that of a fish. So our goal was to try and what can we do to quickly maintain your attention and still get our key message out there. We've gotten a lot of positive response and feedback, and just to provide a data component, if you will, some analytics from the last 90 days. We have 850 active users on our website, just over 800 new users who are folks that have launched our website for the first time. And the average time spent per active user, 1 minute and 13 seconds. A lot of the interaction and traffic on our website has come through just directly going to our website, following a search on academic detailing, through our social media components, and as well as referrals from colleagues. And lastly, we have a newsletter here. With this is something we send to the providers. It's available on our website as well. With it, we share clinical insights, talk about some of the Illinois Advanced events that we're engaging in, collaborations with different healthcare organizations, things like that. Again, it's just a way to maintain communication with our providers. The main theme and key message, I guess, from all of these different materials is that we're shortening kind of our key message, relating it to the organization provider, also providing social media information, clickable links to keep and maintain engagement on our different materials. And with that, I'm going to turn over the table to Dima to talk about social media. And she was at that table. I don't know where she went now, but she is coming up, I think.
Hello to our followers on Instagram. We are at Boston. We are in Boston at the NaRCAD 2024 conference. I am about to go on stage to present on how our team at Illinois Advanced leverages social media to help increase visibility. Stay tuned to see what else our team is doing for the rest of the day and tomorrow. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Dima, and I am the lead on our social media team at Illinois Advance at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So if you want to see how that looks, follow that QR code on your phones, and you can see our link tree with all our social media pages and pretty much our website as well. So what I'll be covering today is some of the recent changes that we've implemented to help increase our visibility. So I'll also give you a little bit of an overview of what our workflow looks like, as well as what those changes, how those changes have impacted our visibility and our numbers in terms of reach, and how many people are kind of seeing our stuff. And then what the future of Illinois Advanced looks like in terms of the material we're trying to put out there, and some recommendations that I'll throw in as I go through the presentation. So before I move on, I wanted to ask if in a poll, does your organization use social media? Give it a few more seconds. All right. So it looks like the majority, or about half and half almost. Some do, some don't. But hopefully for those who don't, this may encourage you to start a social media webpage, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or even, I will also say Twitter, Bevan. So what we did to start implementing some of the changes is kind of redirect our focus and understand what that focus is. So who is our target audience? And so we kind of started by, okay, what age are we looking for? Because we're not going to target to 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 17-year-olds, maybe even 18-year-olds, but we're going to look at those who have graduated, who are in a position that we could reach to and provide detailing visits to. Where are they located? Because we're Illinois Advanced, our focus is within the state of Illinois. So we're going to target Illinois prescribers, we're going to provide Illinois legislation information, things like that. And based on interests as well as job title, which LinkedIn is pretty much the only platform that lets you search somebody by a job title. And the second thing was setting engagement objectives. So what is our goal? Are we looking for brand awareness? So again, increasing visibility. We're also looking to help increase engagement, meaning we want people to like our stuff, share it, and comment on it as well. And also adjusting strategies to help continue increasing that engagement based on what we put out there and the reactions to that. And then finally, using feedback mechanisms. So how do we know it's working? So we put out polls, sometimes we put out surveys, and the feedback based on that will help us inform the content that we're going to put out in the future. With anything, there are going to be some pros and cons. So I'll start with the cons first. We'll end on a good note. So some cons with using social media is that there is a risk of misinformation. To err is human. Sometimes we misinterpret data. So it's important to have a check system. So you have somebody who writes a post or a caption based on clinical literature, and then you have somebody that checks that. And we also have a final check, so it goes through two processes. So we're able to do that because, as Narita mentioned, we do have a robust team. And then there is potential negative feedback. I'm sure everybody has experienced this at some point. We're keyboard warriors out there. And if you're posting about a vaccine, you're going to have somebody who's anti-vaccine. You're going to post about a new drug. Somebody's going to promote a spam on supplements. Those are just things you have to go in and kind of hide or delete so that they're not visible to your audience. It can be time consuming coming up with a caption, proofreading it, tech edits, all of that stuff can be time consuming. I won't go into details on the rest. They're all up there, but and you'll get them, I guess, in a week. And then the pros is, yes, it does help enhance visibility. It helps build credibility. That's very important. When you're doing a visit, you can encourage your learners to go in, check out your social media page. They could see some of the information that you're putting out there. They see that you have a big team or a small team, and that can help also facilitate sharing of information. Let's say you have a new topic, you can share that and post it on your social media pages and share that. And then there's a few more up there. Another thing that we did was content diversification. So we went from just clinical based type of captions to adding trivia questions, true and false questions. So we kind of diversified what we were posting. And then I'll go into that in a little bit. And having a consistent posting schedule based on the insights you can get from your social media pages. There is an insight tab or a analytics tab that helps you determine when your audience is on at a higher number based on the time and day, and then engagement with followers. So when your post goes out, make sure you actually are engaging on other people's posts. So when you're engaging, they can go to your profile and say, who's that? Who's looking at my stuff? So this is an example of what our workflow looks like. It's kind of a busy page here. It is overwhelming in the sense that we do have a lot of people on our team, but as Narissa also mentioned, you can adapt this by following a type of workflow that works for your team and adapting it to that. So in terms of content diversification, we have fact-based, awareness days, weeks, or months, and then we have promotional. So we promote a lot of our materials, a lot of our stuff, a lot of the conferences that we go to, and then fun facts. And then we use a graphic creator. We use Adobe Express now. We were using Canva, but through utilization of our university resources, we were able to get Adobe Express Pro without having to pay for it. And then scheduling, this is what our current scheduling looks like. Not a hard set time that you have to follow, but this is what we follow to be consistent. And then data analysis. We run that once a month to kind of understand, again, what's working, what's not. So these are content scheduling platforms. We use currently Constant Contact. It's a content scheduling platform that allows you to schedule your captions ahead of time. So we do it 1 month at a time, 1 month ahead. So we'll have our captions ready for the month of December by the end of November. These are others. This is Adobe Express where you can also schedule content, and then Hootsuite, which is my favorite, also allows you to schedule content. And gaining insight. So this is what a insight looks like. So analytics on LinkedIn looks like this. It helps you understand what your reach is like, meaning how many people you have reached, how many people have engaged on your material, on your posts. And then I like the one on the right, that's Meta Business Suite. It helps you see Facebook and Instagram at the same time, and it helps you understand what your reach looks like there. This was an example that helped us guide our future content. So we found that when we show our faces and our team, we get a lot more reach than if we were to show a random non-personalized picture, like the one on the left here or on your right. And then that helped us understand that when you have marketing and social media together, it helps us increase visibility. With that, our results showed that we are almost 200% growth compared to last year. But also keep in mind, we are a more robust program. So the numbers you see here, when you look at 3,666, we do have a much larger group that can do these visits. But 200% is not out of reach when you are implementing changes to help increase visibility. So some strategies in the pipeline, we are creating, in the process of creating an online ebook that we can share at booths and conferences, promotional giveaways and raffles via social media and at conferences. We're also looking to incentivize peer referrals. So if you have a learner who enjoyed your program, you can, if they refer you to somebody else, there is some incentive that we could do there. And then finally, manuscript publications and poster presentations that we're working on. So here's the QR code again. If you want to see what our social media pages look like, feel free to follow us there. Those are our handles, but it's all available on that QR code as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dima and Narissa. We'll have you stay up there for Q&A. Any questions? I see one right here from Julia.
This one's for Narissa. When you were talking about sort of increasing your reach in that first stage of discovery, I have 2 questions about that stage. What sort of information do you capture in that portfolio? And secondly, what sort of skill set would the person who's doing that stage of that process, what sort of skills should that person have? Should it be a pharmacist? Should it be a detailer? Or sort of what is your experience or lesson learned from that?
Sure, I can try to answer some of that. Um, so I'm sorry, remind me the first part again. Oh, yes, yes, sorry. So in the portfolios, it basically has this idea of, are they a new contact, a warm contact, an old one that we kind of reestablished? It has general demographic information about that particular contact. It also looks at some of those individualized goals that that particular organization might have, or if it's a contact that we somehow knew through another colleague or things like that. Is there any additional information there in particular that may have come from that personalized relationship? And it also documents all of the conversations, whether it's email, phone call, et cetera. So tracking all of that, taking notes. From what I've seen, it's going to vary. The depth of the tracking information varies from staff to staff. This is a new process, so we're going to learn from it and try to get it a little bit more uniform. But in general, some people are more elaborate, some people are more concise in terms of it. The bottom line is their key message from the conversation was noted there. And I believe there's also like a summary page of things, and everybody throughout the structure. So discovery group, follow-up, provider relations group, they will all add to this portfolio document. So it's something that everybody can see. The value of this, and I actually experienced this firsthand in the beginning when we were trying this, was one of our staff filled out this portfolio, had all the information there. There was a presentation meeting set up, and the day of that presentation, that person was sick. So like, you don't want to cancel on the presentation or the meeting. So myself and another staff were able to take a look at that portfolio and conduct the meeting and carry on as if it was that same staff person because of the detail and the thoroughness of the portfolio. To your second question, in terms of what skill sets, we kind of make our team do what needs to be done. In this, I will say the team came to us with this idea and the structure, this whole outreach plan, and they chose. We had like a, what are your preferences? 1, 2, or 3 categories, and they chose a particular one to be a discovery group, for example. So I think some of those skill sets would be just being able to do the research. How do you look up an organization, not just go on their website, but how do you dig deeper into all of the different components within the website, which can certainly be research in its own, trying to understand the different tabs and how to find, for example, with county health departments, how do you find their I-plan? And how do you go into that I-plan and find the information that's going to be relevant to what are their primary goals for this next year, or this next time phrase? I think those are some of the skill sets. I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of that.
Got it covered.
I think just trying to be, the investigative type. I want to find more information. I want to get as much detailed information as possible.
Kind of have to be a PI without the process improvement.
We have a great comment from someone in the chat from your team, actually, Steve Himmons, who says the #1 rule of discovery is to understand their needs and how your resources can help them, which is really kind of academic detailing in a nutshell. So
yes.
More questions?
Thank you, Steve. He was actually one of the folks who spearheaded this new strategy. So.
Awesome. Thanks for a great presentation. Question for you regarding some of the social media work. What are your thoughts, or I guess your experience working with some of those slightly more involved social media platforms, such as making a TikTok video, doing a YouTube reel, using Snapchat, etc.?
Yeah, so we haven't considered Snapchat, but we have considered TikTok. They are a lot more involved. It's really getting enough of a tidbit of information to get somebody's attention. So it's not out of the question. We have considered TikTok. We kind of spent the last 1.5 years trying to master what we currently have. So we just started a YouTube account where we actually posted our first video on there that we posted to our website. So we're still trying to play around with that, but TikTok is a great platform. But again, it's not going to target a specific audience. It's going to target a wide range of audience who may not be providers or the learners that we're looking for. But again, it's that idea of increasing visibility and building your brand. And that's how people get to know you, who you are, and maybe we'll look into other things that you have.
And I just want to add on to that too. Because we are affiliated with the university, there are some rules and regulations, if you will, that we have to follow. So, you know, we had to get permission to do a YouTube channel. We may need to get permission to do something like TikTok versus some of these more standard social media platforms are approvable, if you will.
Yeah, she's the boss. She's got to know the rules.
I have a question that I think will capture some people's concerns about what if I'm not social media savvy? What if we have no visibility at all? What would you recommend, the two of you, as a starting place that isn't overwhelming for someone who doesn't speak this language?
So my recommendation is, and it may not be to everybody's flavor, but something that we've been training to use is ChatGPT. And I say that very carefully because you never want to copy and paste what ChatGPT tells you. I've done it myself. I also write on the side. I will put things in there and the information's not always correct. So you kind of have to validate the information you find. But what I do like about ChatGPT is if you're stuck, if you are having writer's block on trying to come up with a caption, it's a really great way to go in there and say, make this sound better, right? So you take a caption that you wrote and you ask ChatGPT, make this sound better, add emojis, and it will. Excuse me. So that's kind of a way that we've kind of circumvented the roadblock for people who are not very tech savvy.
I think too, it also goes back to then sort of the old school format of our marketing and promotional materials. The example like with the postcard where we had to get a whole roll of stamps and we weren't even sure if stamps are still sold at the university. So, you know, and then just the utilizing email or phone calls. Again, it's kind of that old school method that isn't necessarily fun, but may be necessary if you don't have those resources or the knowledge, experience, and what have you. I think also too, just to touch back on social media, the idea of that there are resources out there that can help teach you some of those. I mean, I've had the fortune of having Dima, Tina, and the team help teach me how to use some of these things. But you know, I think there are videos or tutorials. LinkedIn has a lot of various tutorials available as well.
We have one question here, and then we're going to transition so you can all have your break.
Thanks for, my mind is blown by the, sorry, are we competing? We're competing. Okay, go ahead, please. I already asked one, so go ahead. Okay, our minds are blown by this 200% increase, and we're all just looking at how we can do this. What do you recommend? I have two questions. One is, what do you recommend for drawing attention to your posts? So you've created the captions, you've got this out there. How do you get more people looking at it?
So we got in the habit of tagging, for example, if we put out a post on diabetes, we actually got in the habit of tagging the American Diabetes Association. And there was a point at some time last year where they actually reposted our video, and it was a reel. So we found that reels do better, especially if they're short. So we tried that out, and within our first video, ADA reposted it. So that's one way. Make sure you're tagging the relevant organizations that you're trying to bring attention to. We've also started doing, like one of the content diversification was doing content awareness days. So like, for example, Fentanyl Awareness Day was May 7th. So we would make a post on that day and tag the appropriate hashtags. A lot of times you'll actually find for Awareness Day social media toolkits. So if you Google social media toolkit for Fentanyl Awareness Day, they actually have posts that you could use and tag. So when people click on those hashtags, they see it, and that's how they can also find you. So that's one way of doing it. Having people share within your smaller network, asking them to share, incentivizing. If you share, maybe you can get a $10 Amazon gift card or enter a raffle. So those types of giveaways help as well. We haven't gotten to that point. That's something I've experienced from my own personal social media when I was more active on my personal account. So that's something that actually helped increase my followers and engagement. Incentives help, especially if they get something out of it.
And I will quickly add on, because my team will be very humble and not praise themselves, but Dima and Tina over there, they primarily handle our graphics, and they come up with very creative ideas. Dima talked about personalized imagery with some of our team pictures and events and things, but they also both come up with very unique patterns, design styles, et cetera, that will draw that attention and make you see, because people like to see pictures before words, right? Or at least I do. And so once I get drawn in through that, then there's focusing in on the content of the caption.
Yeah, and we've also created a template that we kind of start our graphics off with going forward. So we have a banner, a white banner at the bottom with our two logos that you see right here pretty much. So imagine this bottom part of the slide without the website, email, and schedule a visit part. So that's our template. And then we'll use Adobe Stock to find a picture. But we found that using our pictures and personalizing it is what gets the most engagement.
All right, we need to wrap up. We have a quick closing comment from Mike. Thank you so much, Dima and Narissa.
Thank you. I'll be super brief because I'm standing between you and coffee and a break. That was really terrific to see the through line there of how we take the underlying principles of AD that we're all working on and figure out how to get it to people. The way that Dave and Anaid talked about how their program is engaging with folks using a variety of personal methods. Jeremy's points about needing to tap into process improvements and other elements of QI in order to engage. And I will, putting on my very old person hat, a what feels like a very scary foray into social media that clearly can make a big difference, that we need to, as a field, have these multiple on-ramps where we can get people engaged with us. And so seeing those three different approaches together, hopefully you'll seek out the people who presented here and others so that you can share ideas. I assume each of your programs will have a different solution that's right for you, but there was a lot to chew on in those presentations.
Thanks, Mike. And last thing I want to say before we break, and we will not eat into your break, we'll kick everything forward 5 minutes, so not to worry. It's just that there was a pretty robust chat on the virtual thread where we asked folks to share where they're at with social media, with marketing, with websites, and folks started leaving direct links to their websites. We will collect all of those, but what we'd love to ask any of you who are on X, please feel free to hashtag NaRCAD 2024, and we can start collecting a list of which programs have started doing this work, which programs are pioneers in this work that we can look to for future workshops on how to really practically get started with this. And if you have any questions, please seek out the UIC team on that particular topic. Thank you so much to them, to Jeremy from the VA, and to everyone who presented this morning. Thank you. At 11:20. So please take a break. We'll see you at 11:20 for the next session.
Welcome back, everyone. All right. As many of you know, harm reduction is an essential approach in public health, focusing on meeting people where they're at and keeping them safe. In this panel, we'll explore how academic detailing has been used to support harm reduction efforts. Our panelists bring extensive experience in both harm reduction and academic detailing. Adrian Apicelli, Zach Genio, and Erica Paulette were all funded through the National Association of County and City Health Officials to work on a harm reduction academic detailing project. Each presenter has played a key role in integrating these approaches into practice, working across diverse community settings and with a variety of detailing audiences to improve patient care and health outcomes. We're going to start with some polls to warm up.
All right. So we're going to be talking about different audiences other than clinicians who may receive the academic detailing experience. So we want to ask you, what other audiences besides clinicians would be well poised to support, and this is cut off here, but to support people who use drugs? So what other community members, groups, are well poised to support those folks? We've got community health workers, policymakers, patients themselves, right? Turning to one another. Business owners, police officers. Sorry that I missed a couple that were coming in. CBOs. Would love to know if somebody in this room did CBOs. What does that stand for? Oh, I'm sorry, community-based organization. I was thinking of like a chief financial officer. Outreach workers, clergy, yes, NA groups, social workers, all true. Food bank members, yes, people who work there. Lots of ways to think about how to support patients. Law enforcement, again, for social workers. So good stuff. We're gonna switch to, mayors. Would love the mayor to be helping. Yes, that would be wonderful.
What is one word you think of when you think of harm reduction? This is going to be a word cloud. Churches, safety, looks like it's a little cut off. Support, overdoses, stigma, empowerment, empathy, protection, drugs, needle. And it looks like safety, stigma, life.
Condoms, yep.
Safety is and support are our top ones coming in. We have togetherness,
humanism. I love that, humanism.
Risk, help, NaRCAD.
Necessary, change, exchange, caring. Yeah, preventative, all excellent. Keep them coming in because this is an important topic. And it's one at NaRCAD that we've been spending a lot of time supporting programs and implementing. Couple more here, Anna.
Let's see, we have compassion, non-judgmental, equity, knowledge, necessary, non-negotiable, understanding.
Empowerment, love, such good stuff. All right.
And I see whole, I like that a lot.
Yeah, I love that. All right.
Over to you, Bevan.
Well, thanks for participating in the polls, people at home, and those of you in the room. I am so over the moon to be introducing Adrian Apicelli. She is just one of the coolest people I've met in the past couple of years, not to mention that she is an absolute expert in this area, having been a detailer for the first year of this project that we are introducing. It's called the Harm Reduction and Academic Detailing Project, or HRAD for short. And in that first year, Adrian was trained to be a detailer who went to meet with policymakers in New Hampshire to try to assess their needs and convince them to make policy changes that would best support the needs of patients who use drugs, people who use drugs, and really trying to break down stigma as a wall, talk about patient experiences, and most of all, she's quite an expert in valuing patients and people's lived experience as expertise. And if they're going to join a focus group and share their experiences, they should be paid as experts. And so she is just such an advocate for the human experience to be valued. And so I'm delighted to bring her up here for her to talk about her more recent work in the past years of HRAD, where she was a supportive consultant for each of the sites who all provided academic detailing to very diverse groups, two of which you'll learn about today. Give it up for Adrienne Apicelli.
Wow, that was quite an introduction. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to move right through this. As Bevan, I don't even know that I need to present. I think Bevan covered most of it. So I was the harm reduction, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a mix-up here. For about 3.5 years, I was the project manager and the primary academic detailer for the Harm Reduction Education and Technical Assistance Project, which was a partnership between UNH Nursing and the New Hampshire Harm Reduction Coalition. And after that time, I left, and as Bevan said, I joined NACCHO's HRAD project as an external consultant working across all sites, and that was in this last year. I do not have any conflicts of interest to report. All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the HRAD project itself. So the Harm Reduction Academic Detailing Project was designed to determine the efficacy of AD in supporting traditional and non-traditional target audiences across these factors of enhancing knowledge of harm reduction, improving the ability to incorporate harm reduction philosophies and strategies into service provision, and increasing referrals for people who use drugs to community-based harm reduction services. The target populations changed over the years, with the first year one being in 2022. There was it was explicitly primary care providers, and then from 2023 and 2024, they also introduced novel populations, such as elected officials, leaders of the drag community, leaders of faith communities, or volunteer fire departments. In the third and final year, which just concluded in October, these were the sites, and these were the target populations. So we had some folks in Chicago who I think are connected with Illinois Advance, I believe. Perhaps not. Their focus was clinical healthcare providers. Faith and Harm Reduction, who you'll hear from later today, was faith leaders. Iowa Pharmacy Association was detailing pharmacists. Mile High, who you'll also hear from, targeted drag performers. Positively Living, nursing students, Rio Arriba, volunteer fire departments, and then Velanon Art was working with adult daycare health facility staff. Over the course of this project and in shifting from strictly working with primary care providers and thinking about novel populations, the rationale included, when we think about the social determinants of health, healthcare and access to healthcare represents one really small part of a human being's entire social environment. As you all know, because I imagine that most of you are detailing in clinical environments, they are highly regulated, and novel populations have a greater flexibility for adapting harm reduction philosophies and strategies. And then lastly, the stigma against people who use drug, and that knowledge gap of essential harm reduction strategies exists also in a broader social context. Additionally, when thinking about power in communities and sources of power, when you engage in, as you'll hear from Erica and Zach, when you engage with folks in pivotal leadership positions, it actually increases harm reduction capacity just beyond the medical system to the community as a whole. And ultimately, increasing the capacity of individuals, organizations, and communities is vital to reducing drug-related harms as a whole. Sorry, I'm just really nervous. I'm not really one for public speaking, so I'm just gonna say that out loud. Yeah, you're so kind. And I teach, right? So it's Something that that Nature really focused on was the meaningful inclusion of people who use drugs in the project development, as well as key messages, and then the resources, right? And that looks differently depending on the organization. But ultimately, that meaningful inclusion involved recognizing lived experience as expertise, compensating folks the same way that you would compensate other professionals, and then ceding power, really giving folks a voice and a vote, and then to whatever the organizations, because different organizations are in different places in relationship with people who use drugs. So it was very cool to see that across all the projects, how people negotiated that. So that's all I have for you. Does anyone have any questions? I promise the next two people, it's going to be very engaging.
Stop with the self-deprecation. All right, stay up there. Do we have any questions to ask? I know that we haven't learned about the full project yet, but any questions about any of the content that Adrienne has covered so far? If you end up with questions a little bit later in the session, we'll bring her back on up there. You didn't know we were going to do that, did you? Any questions so far? All right. Oh, we do have one question. Excellent.
Hey there, thank you so much for giving that presentation. I've spent a lot of the last year really focused on the space for academic detailing being aligned with public health, and very fortunate to have COIP at UIC and a lot of places that I got to learn more. I was also at NACHO earlier. But I wanted to ask, because I often find myself in a place where not being patient-facing can be a little bit hard to translate. Is there an area that you feel there is a strong need for offering like a translatable type of communication to bridge that gap to help prescribers connect with the patients that they're serving, that academic detailing can foster some support for? It's a big question. Feel free to narrow it down to one example.
Yeah, can you be a little more specific about, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it. Are you asking about like materials to help providers transition into compassionately engaging with folks?
Yeah, and into being understandable, because in the experience I've received back from the providers we detail, it's sort of like, well, I've got it. How do I get it across and make it so that the individual doesn't leave their healthcare visit so overwhelmed and overburdened with information and not knowing their resources?
Yes. Okay, I think part of that has to do with like the development of the detailing aid that you're using, right? And just including those. So obviously you're gonna ground in the data, but then also just having examples of being like, this is how you could approach this conversation, or this is, I'm trying to think of like times, I think a lot of times it's actually just material support, right? Like if you're asking someone to give naloxone to all the patients who are prescribed, like then you should be ready to give that to those folks, or build that relationship with the organization locally who's going to do that. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm answering your question. Is it about like the resistance, or it's about the materials?
No, you completely are, because in the naloxone example, which is a great one, they'll be like, oh, and by the way, grab naloxone. And it's like, maybe we didn't explain what naloxone is, that it's accessible, free in several locations, what community resources in your area you can reach to, how you would even use it. The patient might still be thinking injection only, for example, which can be more intimidating. So I think sometimes it's like trying to help that information trickle through to make it less intimidating at the patient level.
Oh, for sure. I think it's just like ease of access, right? So like, and I definitely, when I was detailing medical providers, brought a case of naloxone and said, here is the contact information for the person so you can just set this up in a sustainable, ongoing way, right? So like, because you don't want to have to be the middleman. But I think so much of it is just in thinking through and strategizing around the materials that you're bringing, right? Yeah.
Thank you for indulging me with that.
For sure. Thank you.
More indulgences to come, but up next we have, we have another time. Oh, we do. My apologies. Continue.
Hi, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about how, what the impact might look like in a community that is recognizing lived experience as expertise, and how that's impacting the effectiveness of academic detail and readiness for change within communities where there's a need to kind of elevate the pathways to care for people who are using drugs.
Yeah, I think, for example, when we were developing key messages and resources for elected officials in New Hampshire, we had met with syringe service program participants, and we used direct quotes, right? And there is often such a disconnect between a syringe service program participant and a policymaker, right? And so when you ask, I think, when you're using a voice and you ask the right questions, it's just so apparent how large that divide is. And I think that's really important for policymakers to hear directly, right? And I think that was really powerful. And New Hampshire's kind of like a wild state, right? Like the south of the north. And I think in another program, they did a photo voice, and they were a syringe service program, and they used photo voice and then used those narratives and those pictures in their detailing with clinicians, which was really, they reported it being like quite powerful. Yeah, I think whenever you're bringing the voice directly in a way where people often don't have access to that I think changing the narrative is like how we change our minds, right? Yeah, for sure. Will we good?
Thank you, Adrian. We'll bring you back up at the end if there are more questions. Zach Genio is the program manager for Be the Vibe. It is my pleasure to introduce him. He's a harm reduction program manager of the Mile High Behavioral Health Care in Colorado. His work in harm reduction lies at the intersection of safer sex and safer drug use in the queer communities. Zach also works as a local drag queen in Colorado in order to bring his harm reduction advocacy into the LGBTQ+ community through the camp and glamour of drag. She organizes and hosts drag events where audience can get naloxone or STI testing. Please welcome Zach.
Oh my gosh, I'm not even in a wig and heels and I'm getting that. I appreciate it. Hi everybody, my name is Zach. I use any pronouns. Like I said before, I am a program manager over at Mile High Behavioral Health Care. I'm also known as Dr. Zacharina Jenny Ho, very creative name. I am not a real doctor. Legally, I do have to say that. Wah, wah. I know. I learned my lesson after the second lawsuit. But I'm not a real doctor, but I am a harm reductionist. So I work for an agency called Mile High Behavioral Health Care in Denver, Colorado. And within that, we have a program called Be the Vibe, and it's BEE like a bumblebee because queer people love a pun. So that's why we did it. Our program does all things safer sex, safer drug use for queer and trans communities, as well as all of our other communities that our agency serves, which really boils down to everybody. So safer sex, safer substance use, that means educating on naloxone, fentanyl test strips, STI testing, safer use methods, and everything kind of in between there. I always say that my job is sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but instead of rock and roll, it's more of like a top 40s pop. Lots of Madonna, lots of Ariana Grande. But today I'm going to be talking about our program, which was through the Harm Reduction Academic Detailing program, where we trained drag artists. We looked at drag artists as our detailee, including drag queens, kings, and things all throughout Colorado. So we got some photos. I'm not in drag in any of these photos. These are some of our detailees all across the state that have been helping us, supporting us, and look how fabulous they all look. So fun. So we're going to talk about all of that, and I'm going to try to get through this so that if people have questions, we can really dig into it. So no disclosures, pretty straightforward. Going to start with a fun poll for everybody. So Who has ever been to a drag show? We've got A for yes, B for no, C for maybe. Sometimes you don't know where you end up. Okay, I'm seeing lots of no's and a couple maybes, lots of yeses, which is great. If you've answered no or maybe, Boston does have a great drag scene, and I have done all the research, so there are shows tonight in case people want to educate themselves and have some fun. So after our little reception, maybe we could go hit up some drag shows, put on our most fabulous outfits. So I asked that just because I think for folks that have been to a drag show, there's so much community built around drag when it comes to the queer LGBTQ plus community. It's a space within nightlife where we know higher risk behaviors are happening, right? Higher risk sex, higher risk substance use are happening, and it's inside the nightclubs, right? It's not at the doctor's office is where the higher risk behavior is happening. It's not in offices, in public health offices, right? And so kind of part of this idea was how can we bring some of this harm reduction into the space, right? That classic phrase of like meeting people where they're at or meeting people where they are is so important to this. So I'm going to preface as well with talking about how we engage people who use drugs. Our agency has a very strong pillar within the way that we work, that we engage people who use drugs. We have people who use drugs and have lived and living experience within our agency, but also in leadership roles, which is incredibly important, right? As an agency that's rooted in recovery, treatment, and harm reduction, it's important for us to have that. So for this program as well, we didn't have to really create any new structures, but if this isn't something that you regularly do and you want to engage and work more with communities who use drugs, it's very important that you are engaging in intentional ways. So we have a harm reduction advisory committee that already exists. It includes a lot of different people from lots of different backgrounds. We have staff, we have people with lived experience. We also have people with living experience, people who are still using, right? And maybe that's more chronic use all the way down to quote unquote recreational use. We have people from our queer community, especially for this project because it's catering towards the queer community, partner organizations, grassroots harm reductionists, and even more as well. We pay people because we always want to pay people for their expertise, which was mentioned, and that's funded through other programs, which is great. So we have this advisory committee. So we really kind of, as a committee, determined that within nightlife, and queer nightlife specifically, there is a need for more harm reduction, right? There's a need for getting some of this information out, meeting people where they're at, and figuring out what is the best way that we can do that. For me personally, like I said, I am a drag queen, and so I love drag. I think it has such an amazing, powerful message. I think that drag as well, really when you look at queer community, drag queens, kings can be leaders within their community, right? These are folks that are looked up to historically, have helped shape the path for queer people, along with so many others, like so many trans women of color that have led the charge for us. But looking at kind of that public opinion leader, that popular opinion leader model, and expanding it and adding a little bit more to it. So we first did a little preliminary review and looked at some of our Colorado drag artists, and we asked, like, would y'all even want to do this, right? That was step one. And so we did a survey where we asked a bunch of drag queens, kings, and quote-unquote monsters. Colorado has a very big alternative drag scene that exists, so does Boston. And through our survey, they all indicated a very high willingness to participate and incorporate harm reduction messaging into the work that they do. That willingness increased when compensation was added. Makes sense. But the coolest thing is this last bullet point, which was that there was an agreement with the statement, I am someone involved in drag/nightlife entertainment, and I want to be involved in public health projects. And it was on a scale of 1 to 10, the average was an 8.7. So there's a high willingness, which kind of even surprised me because it shows that the drag community is a community that really wants to be involved. I think that this is something that isn't too much of a shock now that I've really thought about it. The queer community is a lot more open to harm reduction than other communities because harm reduction has been intertwined with queerness, queer communities throughout history, especially when we look at HIV/AIDS programming, interventions that have existed, right? Those have always been a part of queer communities. So then we worked to develop our key messages, and if you want to scan this QR code, we created a harm reduction toolkit, because hot people don't gatekeep. So feel free to scan. I love open resources. I'll also take a step back to this great. Okay. So we developed our key messages. Recognizing first and foremost, the majority of drag artists are not public health experts, right? So we did not come at them through a clinical lens. We did not expect a certain level of understanding, and we did not come in swinging for the rafters with some of the higher level topics, right? Like, we're not gonna talk to a drag queen that doesn't know much about harm reduction, about medication assisted treatment, right? Like, that's gonna be 0 to 100. So when we were developing our key messages, we really wanted to keep them simple. We wanted to keep them at their core of what we're asking, bless you, our drag queens to be able to do. So they aren't experts in public health, but they are experts in their local queer nightlife and entertainment scenes. And so that's the part that we really wanted to leverage. So our key messages revolved around how can you incorporate harm reduction into your time when you're on the microphone, when you're talking in front of a group of people in the nightclub? How can you leverage social media? How can you be a champion and talk to venue owners and producers about harm reduction and incorporating it? So we wanted to take their expertise and build off of it with specific content and very basic and foundational content to harm reduction. So we wanted those to all align with skills and resources. We also made this toolkit so that people could pull it up on their phone. So if you just scroll to the bottom of that page, that's on our resources page for our website, Be The Vibe. And at the bottom is an embedded PDF that you can just scroll through. So we wanted it to be able, like a drag queen could pull it up while she's on the mic. I'm going to jump straight into kind of some of our evaluation aspects so that we can keep this going. So we asked people, we did a lot of really great evaluation. I come from a research background. I love data, I love numbers. And we had a great partnership with the University of Denver Butler Institute. Their team helped us with a lot of the evaluation. Shout out Shayna, Meredith, and that entire team. We asked our drag artists what they think their familiarity is when it comes to harm reduction concepts or strategies and actual resources. And we got a nice kind of spread when it came to how familiar they were with harm reduction. Some folks had experience, some folks knew certain kind of aspects of harm reduction through their own life, right? Like HIV testing, things like that. But when it came to actual resources, we saw a much lower level of familiarity. And then when we asked, what do you think about your audiences? Do you think your audiences know kind of the same things? Are they familiar with harm reduction concepts, and then are they familiar with programs or resources? It was seen as very low. So this was part of our data of, wow, this is a gap that we can absolutely fill and help push people more towards being familiar. When we did our academic detailing sessions, they operated on a one-on-one level. We paid our drag artists for every session that they attended. The pay rate was $100 for 30 minutes, which you might be thinking, whoa, that's a nice payday. But we're asking for drag artists to really leverage so much more outside of that session, right? And then, so they existed on a one-on-one session. We went over a bunch of topics and used kind of that toolkit as the guiding document. So my strategy was, how can we make it as easy as possible? So we went through the resource together so they felt familiar with being able to pull it up. Some of the data that we found when we looked at pre and post scores for harm reduction different skills was a lot of really cool numbers. Before, we have people's mean score of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable do they feel with specific topics? It might be, I understand what harm reduction is, or I'm comfortable explaining harm reduction principles to an audience, or, you know, I am able to serve as an effective ambassador for harm reduction in my community, before and after their session. And we saw a statistically significant increase in every category for our artists before and after, which was awesome. Granted, this was only one session. We did have plans to do more sessions, but then Pride hit, and that is chaos to try to pin down a drag queen during Pride. So our program got put on pause and is going to be returned to very shortly. But even just some of this preliminary data on this novel audience has been really promising. So we had 19 folks go through our academic detailing process all around Colorado, queens, kings, and a very diverse sample. There's a significant increase in those harm reduction skills that were noted by self-reporting from those artists. The harm reduction acceptability scores, which was how we measured folks' understanding and how much they accept different concepts of harm reduction, were high prior to the session with little change post. So most people were really open already, so there wasn't much change, which at least is comforting that the scores were high before. The detailees reported that the sessions were helpful and helped them change their own behaviors. We saw a change in how they had kind of reported their own habits when it came to substance use and sex, and began even using us as resources, not only professionally, but personally too. In general, there was a good bit of feedback that we found. Again, there was an overall just incredible eagerness when it came to implementing this work. And if there's one big takeaway, if you zoned out, zone back in, if there's one big takeaway from this presentation, it's that we can think of non-clinical folks as our champions in our community, right? Those are the people that are interacting with people every day. You only go to the doctor maybe a couple times a year, and that's assuming you get your appointments, right? But our bartenders, our drag artists, our small business owners, they're interacting with people daily, hourly, weekly, right? Regularly. And so when we create humans in our community that can be champions for us, they can take and spread our messages further. So our drag artists have helped us get into bars that we have been trying for years to get into and have failed. But once they said, oh, let me text him right now and I'll make sure that you can get in and talk with them. We've been able to train and expand into training some of the biggest nightclubs in Denver and Colorado across the scene. So there's been this benefit of having these folks that have been vouching for us, been able to help promote us and share our message even further, beyond not only kind of what we're expecting with them with the academic detailing of telling audiences, but leveraging their connections. So there's so much power when we mobilize, when we empower people, right? Through that queer culture, we can mobilize that queer community, which is really amazing. There were some more requests for even more resources. People wanted social media toolkits, which is something that we're developing, as well as a resources toolkit. So drag artists could come pick up a box of NaRCAD and fentanyl test strips and maybe some swag so that during their games they could promote our agency, give out some rewards, and also be able to pass out all of the resources we do. One of the big things when it came to feedback from our artists was a lot of nervousness about sharing wrong information. People were nervous of, what if somebody asks me something, wild, or what if somebody asks, like, is the queer community even affected by this? And I don't know all the, all those answers. And kind of to help ease that, we helped assure people that, we helped assure people that they can reach back out to that resource and be able to have that information on our toolkit, and also just refer out. That was our biggest thing, is when in doubt, just send them our way, right? It helps that I'm a drag queen myself, so I was able to really relate to my peers on that peer-to-peer level of recognizing, hey, I get it. There are some venue producers that I don't want to get into the weeds with. Send them my way, right? Be like, hey, I don't want to put myself or my show on the line, so I'm going to send you to my friend Zach, right? Because we don't want folks to feel nervous and hold back, but just stick with kind of those baseline key messages. But again, the biggest thing was that the idea of drag artists being a part of public health interventions is really promising, and academic detailing has been a very favorable option in ensuring that these folks are comfortable and competent in the skills. Next steps that we're working on, we're going to complete our follow-ups. So the original AD design included 2 follow-up sessions. We're hoping to return to that. We also had a large number of participants that wanted to be a part of the program, so we're going to re-outreach them to be able to include them. We're going to create and disseminate those other toolkits, so a social media toolkit and then something that folks can come and grab if they want resources for their shows. And then the classic continually evaluating. We really want to be able to find the data to help showcase the strength of this program. So I know that was a lot. Like I said, hot people don't gatekeep. So if you ever want to chat with me, I love talking, if you can't tell. So you can reach out to me, either boy version of me, Zach, or via Dr. Zacharina, and I will be able to chat with you as well and share some of that information. So other than that, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Zach. Any questions for Zach, please raise your hand high so we can see you.
Hi, Zach. Wonderful presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
I had a quick question about the fentanyl test strips. I know right now a lot of the opioids right now is really really fentanyl. Are you guys testing for using xylazine test strips in your harm reduction?
That's a great question. We are. Xylazine test strips are a lot more expensive than fentanyl test strips currently. And so we prioritize those for communities of folks who are opioid drug users specifically, because a lot of the data is also showing that xylazine most commonly is showing up with fentanyl, and very rarely are we seeing xylazine alone. So we kind of prioritize the fentanyl test strips for our what we call, quote, general population, and I'm saying quote because what really defines general, right? But like the folks that we might see at like a club or nightlife scene, we prioritize the fentanyl test strips, and if people ask for xylazine, then we're more than happy to provide, but those are primarily for our more chronic folks who are using drugs, people who are opioid users primarily, things like that.
For that question. I see a question over here. Thanks, Rachel.
Great. Yeah, quick question. So your academic detailing efforts were to the drag kings and queens, and they would then go out to their peers. Did you do any education to providers, and did those individuals go out to providers in the medical community and talk about that as well, or was it really just to their peers?
Yeah, great question. It was mainly to peers. So we wanted it to be through that non-formal setting. So the drag artists were leveraging their platforms if they have shows on the microphone whenever they're hosting, social media, connecting folks with resources, those casual connections, because drag queens are often in the middle of the nightlife or a nightclub, people will go up to the drag queen, want to talk to the drag queen, so then there's opportunities for that one-on-one. But no, all of the academic detailing efforts went to the drag artists and kind of outside of the clinical space.
Zach, that was a great presentation. I wanted to follow up on that question, coming to this from the perspective of a primary care doctor, so that's sort of where my head is at. I'm curious how you think about, if that's connecting and succeeding, your AD's working, they're succeeding. What's the next step to help your detailers, their community members they're reaching, come back if they're ready, say, I'm ready to come look for a PrEP prescription or look for, find out if my doctor will prescribe buprenorphine. Or on the other end primary care, it could be any kind of clinician, to be sort of ready to, be a partner when someone who maybe was activated there comes looking for treatment. How do you think, I don't know if you're doing that currently, but how do you think about that, for those of us sitting at the primary care perspective?
Absolutely, yeah. Our agency's a pretty large one in Colorado, and so we have a full continuum of care, including medical. And so it kind of becomes a bit for us a one-stop shop, which is really nice. And our staff, through internal training, receive a lot of like queer-informed education, trauma-informed care, right, gender-affirming care education. So that referral system is kind of set up of a no wrong door entry within our space. So if people come to our harm reduction program and ask for treatment or referrals to other things, we're able to link and navigate with care. I think when it comes to, in general, part of our program is also within the toolkit sharing other organizations, because we recognize we're always not the best for everything. So we provide other options of folks who we know and are trusted and are vetted to be resources, because there are going to be people that are better for Spanish-speaking folks. There are going to be people who are better for uninsured folks. And so being able to help provide some of those pathways as well has been helpful for the drag artists to know and have that on hand in case somebody asks. Then they can pull up that resource, and if they have a question, they can just send them our way. So we really try to create that line of connection of it's not we teach you this and then you're on your own. It's a relationship that is formed, a partnership that we hope continues, and it goes both ways, right? Not only are they helping support our interventions and programs, but also we're supporting them. We're helping and being behind them for whatever support they might be needing.
Thank you so much, Zach. Give it up for Zach.
Thank you.
You know, when Zach just said, it's not like we throw them out there on their own, and, really talking about the detailers being a conduit, a connector. And sometimes that means saying, hey, I don't know the answer, I might not be the best person, but I know who is. That is such the essence of academic detailing. And he also spoke about the beauty of the relationship, right? Building that relationship and looking at trust. That's also at the core of academic detailing. So just really so excited about this project, and it's just such a unique approach to take this model and apply it to something different. So next up, I'm delighted to introduce Erica Paulette. She will be rounding out this presentation by looking at a new angle. She is the Executive Director of Faith in Harm Reduction. She has a Master's in Social Work as well as a Master's in Divinity, and is the founder and the Minister of Harm Reduction and Overdose Prevention Ministries for the National United Church of Christ. As a faith leader, she has, I'm sure, relationships that she has built over time. Again, just so many through lines with academic detailing being all about the relationship. So I'm very excited to introduce Erica Paulette. Thank you, Erica. Come on up.
And despite the fact that my outfit might suggest that I also am somebody who loves public speaking, that is actually not true. I also was told by Zach that Dr. Zaccarino might be here, so I wore my drag today, which I don't ordinarily do, except for on Sundays. Adrian is going to help me. Ordinarily, I have a digital minister who would manage slides for me, so. All right, did we just disconnect y'all? Sorry about that.
I think one thing we can do too is I'm happy to give Adrian this to advance the slides. We've got a broad expanse of tech approaches here. We've got people doing live Instagram videos, and then we've got a handheld clicker. So we've got different extremes of technological savviness here, but we will get back up and running in just a moment.
That's right.
All right. Give it up for the tech staff for dealing with so many challenges today. Much appreciation. And we should be all set for clicker activation.
Great. So we're going to move right to the next slide, where I'm going to say I have no kind of conflicts of interest to disclose. And then we're going to move to the next one.
All right, there we go.
Great. And if we can also go to the next one, that's great.
Adrian, you're fired.
It's either that or me who's fired. I'm not quite sure. So any which way, for folks who, I imagine folks are not familiar with faith and harm reduction, so let me briefly texturize who we are before I begin. We're a national collective of faith and community leaders who mobilize spirit, community, and power in partnership with people who use drugs and people who do sex work, recognizing that for many of us, these are overlapping identities. Born from conversations with communities of faith, harm reduction organizations, and unions of people who use drugs throughout the U.S., we fill a unique role as connector, community mobilizer, and capacity builder, fostering innovative and previously untapped cross-sector collaborations to expand and strengthen harm reduction in principle, practice, and policy. Our mission is to co-create a justice movement which connects people who use drugs, people who do sex work, and communities of faith through the development of harm reduction-centered spiritual resources, ritual support, and spiritual care. Next slide. The roots of this project, like all our work, was imagined and lived out in partnership with people who use drugs. The Survivors Union is the only national union of people with living experience, a number of whom serve on the Leadership Collective for Faith and Harm Reduction, guiding strategic planning, organizational visioning, and program delivery. In conversation with two of their principals, we were connected with their leadership in the Appalachian region, resulting in the development of contracting relationships with 5 NSU leaders living in Alabama, New York, West Virginia, and North Carolina. With one exception, everyone who participated in executing this initiative from both NSU and Faith and Harm Reduction is a person with living experience of substance use and lived experience of overdose, incarceration, and other impacts of the war on people who use drugs. NSU leaders who self-selected to participate in this project identify as people of Christian faith and are connected to a number of other endangered communities. As we had existing relationships with all but one of our colleagues from NSU, there was a level of familiarity and safety that existed, such that through the whole of this project, we had opportunities to be in conversation with and provide care with each of the leaders about acute spiritual, emotional, and material issues that were arising. Next slide. While the Appalachian region experiences a disproportionate overdose mortality burden as a whole, rural counties consistently show the highest overdose-related deaths per population compared to urban, metropolitan, and suburban areas. A study in the Journal of Appalachian Health found that rural communities in Appalachia face unique barriers to treatment for substance use disorder and overdose prevention, including concerns about stigma and lack of harm reduction services. In particular, conflicting narratives around substance use, people who use substances, and drug overdose, which we found were foundational to polarizing perspectives on how to address substance use and overdose, as well as broad disagreement about the legitimacy of harm reduction strategies versus more traditional abstinence-based strategies. While 75% of adults in the U.S. report some religious affiliation, faith community involvement in rural areas holds an increased level of importance. Faith-based organizations, including places of worship, are often one of only a few places for people to cultivate community connection, provide organized access to tangible resources such as food, healthcare, and education, while also building trust through connection and the provision of social support. As Christianity is the major religion in the region, the recipients of detailing for the project were determined to be faith leaders from the United Church of Christ, serving over 2,400 congregations located in the 13 states which comprise the Appalachian region, as well as ministers who serve the national denominational setting. Next slide. We recognize that faith-based organizations and their leadership remain an untapped force to address and heal the harms of the overdose crisis, that they possess significant social capital and influence as thought leaders and have the power to change the narrative about the overdose crisis from one which dehumanizes and stigmatizes to one rooted in compassion, love, and justice. Additionally, communities of faith have a rich history as leaders of social change. Faith leaders can have a substantial impact on human rights protections for people who use drugs, access to harm reduction services, and the overdose crisis through prophetic advocacy, public witness, and strategic conversation with decision makers. Next slide. This particular key message was the heart of this initiative and was identified by NSU leadership as being where they have experienced a significant level of harm connected to communities of faith, and where they believed significant positive momentum could be achieved. In the Christian tradition, language is how creation happens, not as a meticulous engineering project, nor a work of magic, but entirely spoken into being. The word not only communicates the divine intention, it actively accomplishes it. Our conversation with faith leaders was centered on how our words also create worlds. Worlds where people who use drugs are often portrayed as being less than human, diseased, as sinners. The Spirit of Harm Reduction Action Kit that we developed as part of this process was created to support the key messages and features voices and stories from people with lived and living experience of substance use and overdose. It also provides theological reflection on language and a language guide, as well as education and information about how and where drug-related stigma and the war on people who use drugs came to be, and how it continues to drive and exacerbate the root beds of injustice and harm. Next slide. To support the uptake of this key message, we shared, created, and made connections to a range of local resources as available. National resources, if local resources were not readily available. One key asset that my colleague Hill developed was one-pagers for each of the target states, which included vital overdose prevention and response resources, including how to access naloxone and other harm reduction supplies, detailed harm reduction legal landscapes, including paraphernalia laws, status of SSP supportive legislation or authorization, Good Samaritan laws, and drug-induced homicide laws, amongst others. Additionally, we offered overdose prevention, recognition, and response trainings to all faith leaders, where we detailed in person. We were a hybrid project, and made connections to online resources, pre-recorded resources, and offered to do virtual trainings, or made connections to local and regional overdose prevention trainers when needed. Next slide. This key message gets at some of the earliest conversations we had with faith leaders, and that was hearing that they lacked the resources theologically, liturgically, pastorally, and prophetically to be able to engage the many issues touching their communities connected to the war on people who use drugs. It became evident early on that the development of resources for faith leaders that speak the language of faith and pull from congregational culture was going to be critical to not only move faith leaders, but their ability to connect with their congregations as well. To support these efforts, we created a library of prayers, service components such as sermon seeds, hymns, all as part of a comprehensive harm reduction worship service planning resource. Next slide. Faith leaders are often tapped to speak to a multitude of issues. In fact, we jokingly call it rent-a-collar in some instances. But in all honesty, we are often asked to speak on issues we know very little about, nor have critical connection to. To address this need and support the uptake of this key message, we developed a library of theological one-pagers and resources on a range of harm reduction issues, including syringe service programs, drug-induced homicide laws, overdose prevention centers, bodily autonomy, as well as provided explicit opportunities to contribute to critical and emerging advocacy campaigns, sign-on letters, public hearings, and amicus briefs. Next slide. And to support this key message, our Spirit of Harm Reduction Toolkit provides explicit examples to partner with and provide leadership opportunities across the life of the church, including expanding compassionate care and hospitality offerings, community building, collaborative advocacy, and resource development. Next slide. While we worked with our colleague, Dr. Tracy Green, to develop a harm reduction attitude survey tool to establish a baseline at the onset of this project, we decided immediately upon engaging our first detailee that we were going to need to pursue a much more conversational and faith leader-led pace, which centered safety, confidentiality, and acknowledged that drug-related stigma and the war on people who use drugs has deep personal and professional implications, especially for those of us entrusted with holding and tending to the intimate details of our congregation and community members' lives. So we constructed an interview script, listening session format, which we used as a loose frame for asking about how substance use, overdose, the war on people who use drugs shows up in their work, in their congregations, familiarity with harm reduction in philosophy and practice, as well as familiarity with local resources. I think while this should have been anticipated, I think we were surprised by the level of internalized and other stigma that faith leaders carry around issues connected to substance use. Many of our conversations began with denial that substance use or other impacts of the war on people who use drugs were an issue, and with few exceptions, quite quickly shifted to the painful acknowledgement that substance use has been a source of great pain, personally, for their families, and in the many communities they belong to. Next slide. All in all, the whole of this project was wildly successful and excited this harm reductionist and pastor who was entirely new to academic detailing at this time last year. Some of the key themes that emerged were we made significant momentum in shifting the narrative and culture in the United Church of Christ, in the Appalachian region, in support of harm reduction, including the following key outcomes. All detailees reported expanded understanding and deepened curiosity about the root bed of the war on people who use drugs and its impact on intersectional justice issues. Detailees in numerous states have made bold reaches into conversation in partnership with harm reduction organizations, including a detailee in New York who outreached to their state DOH and has since become a drug checking site, and who also hosted a day of prayer and action to end overdose in partnership with the state's drug user union, trained 292 people to reverse an overdose in under 2 hours. A detailee in North Carolina has committed to being a naloxone distribution site and has interest in supporting development of an SSP on their campus. A detailee in Lexington, Kentucky installed an overdose prevention box next to their AED in their church and outside for community members. Not only a critical resource, but a powerful public testimony to their belief in the worth of people who use drugs. 100% of detailees have since asked for technical assistance to address NIMBYism and potential community and congregational pushback. Next slide. We learned of the need for more clergy-specific and faith-based spaces and resources with which to explore the drugs issue and challenge drug-related stigma, including theological and liturgical resources, which story harm reduction for faith communities, again, using the many languages of faith. The need for safe and confidential spaces for faith professionals to obtain support, technical assistance, education, and spiritual care, which provides both professional and peer-to-peer information sharing and support sharing opportunities. As a result of this project, the national setting of the UCC implemented a formal data collection process across all 5,400 congregations to determine who is doing harm reduction, who and how communities are grappling with overdose in their local context, as well as capacity building and resource needs. Next slide. As a result of this project, we met with all 32 UCC disaster ministers across the country to explore a harm reduction needs assessment and to develop a harm reduction rooted response plan, timely for our Southern Director, who has been leading recovery efforts in 3 counties in Western North Carolina following Hurricane Helene, in partnership with parish nurses, UCC leaders, and 2 detailees, a relationship that did not exist prior to this project. One of the detailees has invited us to help rewrite the ministerial code of ethics, to develop a system for supporting clergy who use drugs, and create educational and harm reduction resources for committees on ministry as they seek to operationalize the process for supporting clergy in crisis, including clergy who use drugs. And lastly, the elevation of harm reduction in faith-based communications and publications, including an article in a national progressive Christian magazine called Sojourners, also resulted from this project. Next slide. In ongoing collaboration with our partners at NSU and other unions of people who use drugs, we will continue to follow their lead and listen to opportunities to collaborate, to expand harm reduction offerings and education for communities of faith across an expanded range of traditions. We will be continuing to grow the Multi-Faith Harm Reduction Alliance, which was launched in late September, right as this project ended, which is a designation process for communities of faith committed to harm reduction values, and which provides a peer-to-peer community and learning cohort with which to grow harm reduction ministries across the country, utilizing assets and learnings from this detailing project. And also creation of clergy conversation spaces where faith leaders can obtain clinical pastoral education on harm reduction led by an ordained faith leader and a harm reduction clinician. Expanded technical assistance offerings with health departments and harm reduction organizations looking to develop allies amongst local faith leadership. And of course, identifying ways to expand resources for this work, including funding and harm reduction supplies for communities of faith. Thank you.
We're going to open it up to questions, including from folks online. We do have a question from Elizabeth Faldemach in Maine. Can you share ideas for working with a special population? Oh, I apologize. This is for the entire group. I'm going to bring it back to that one. But if there are questions here specifically for Erica, we do have one for Mike if no one else has a question. Oh, we do have one in the back, and then we'll go to you, Mike.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. I see in your next steps you're looking at the kind of an ecumenical, multi-faith kind of thing. Just curious, the people that were feet on the ground in your communities already, did they have those ripples with different faith groups? Like, did other people find out what they're doing and then the Episcopalian said, hey, me too, or, you know, something like that?
Yeah, no, that's been a very significant piece of this was, again, hearing from faith leaders when this work, really began. So we started back in 2017, and folks really looking for ways to articulate the drugs issue and its impact on their congregations and communities, and really lacking the language, lacking the relationships to be able to explore this in ways that made sense, again, in their hyperlocal context, in their faith tradition context, in an ecumenical context. And so we have had, a lot of the folks that we were able to, we had a pretty challenging time engaging folks originally around this issue. And the folks that we were able to tap were folks who had expressed to other colleagues specifically about challenges around perhaps syringe litter on their congregational campus, or the experience of faith leaders who have done far too many funerals for people who have lost their lives to overdose, and how to manage kind of congregational stigma. And I think by having the opportunity to hear that folks were able to kind of tap into these resources, folks took this and they ran with it also. It was really incredible to see. We had 8 of our detailees who did a harm reduction justice Sunday service. Those were not all Christian congregations. And so I think that there was, people have been longing for this. And so having these folks as really ambassadors for this was really instrumental in mobilizing. Yeah.
That was terrific. I'd love to ask you basically the same question I was asking Zach. How do you, from the sort of clinician perspective, how have you thought about, as you're doing your work, maybe as your detailees are engaging their congregants who might be interested in seeking medications as part of their treatment for an opioid use disorder, or if they might need PrEP because there's someone who uses injection drugs, whatever it might be. Thinking about that, the reaching out to the clinical community, and again, on the other end as well, preparing any kind of engagement with the clinical community. As clinicians, we really learn very little about talking to patients who come to us with perspectives informed by faith. And so if you are sending someone to their clinician, much like in the prior presentation, we would hope that the clinicians are ready to meet patients where they're coming. I'm curious how you're thinking about that at this stage.
Well, no, that's a great question. And we have been really fortunate to I'm based in New York City, and have an incredible relationship with both New York City DOHMH, New York State DOH, and have been partnering with, like I said, health departments across the country to help do some of this bridge building work between. And so a lot of it on our side has been education with faith leaders around what those kind of treatment options are, ways that we can help reduce barriers to access to care, which we understand to be stigma and silence. And so a lot of it has really been, again, doing some of this basic kind of education around what those options are, as well as challenging kind of the narratives around substance use and people who use them, such that we're able to have these, and folks are able to perceive faith leaders as sites of support and perhaps referral or connection to care, rather than I think what many of our folks have experienced, which has been really stigmatizing and dehumanizing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Erica. I'm actually going to have one more question just for Erica, and then we'll get the whole panel back up for a couple closing thoughts. So to the back to Rachel.
Okay, I just have a quick question about how you bridged that communication with maybe some more conservative communities, especially smaller communities where most of the faith community is very conservative and may not be accepting, and the stigmatizing language that is still very prevalent in a lot of our small communities.
Yeah, no, that was, and based on the region that we decided to cast this or kind of frame this project in, so Appalachia, specifically rural Appalachia and amongst Christian communities. While the UCC is a pretty wildly left-leaning denomination, that is not true of all of our congregations. We are a congregational system, and so we definitely have run up against that, but we were able to make, again, being a relationship-based process, myself being a faith leader, the other folks who were doing the detailing also being faith leaders, and being able to kind of craft these relationships of trust and kind of permission to not know and to wonder and to perhaps object, right? And we heard that quite often. But also to then make explicit connections to either existing wellness ministries that they already had, to build on the strengths, congregational strengths, so working with parish nurses in a couple areas was really our in, and to be able to draw some synergy with some existing, economic justice or other issues. And, we also, it was, the values base was something that we were able to share. And so to kind of find these places where we could meet and at least begin to have conversations and stay in relationship. Not everybody like jumped instantaneously in any which way. This was very much a process. This was, but I think by kind of virtue of, just a willingness to listen and learn.
Thank you so much, Erica. Please ignore the old heating pipes of this hotel saying hello. Please give a round of applause for Erica and the whole panel. And if the three of you wouldn't mind sharing the podium and so that we can have you on camera for the people at home and standing a bit closer to the podium, that would be lovely. Thank you. Do we have any questions for the panel, either someone in particular or a shared question for the three of them? We do have a virtual one after that as well. Thank you, Rachel.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentations. I kind of wanted to piggyback off of the previous two questions in the opposite direction, basically. Did you see any success? A lot of people who are currently using drugs or have experienced drug use in the past have been traumatized by spiritual and medical communities. And have you seen any success in getting more utilization of those systems through your program outreach?
Yeah, that was a really kind of significant piece, and kind of in our inception. I was working for National Harm Reduction Coalition for 16 years prior to, while putting myself through seminary, and ultimately joining the UCC once I got ordained, and hearing stories from folks who had been excluded from, harmed by, longed to be welcomed back into spiritual community in a way which recognized the wholeness of who they are and their dignity and their worth. And so yes, we have had, and that's part of why we launched the Multi-Faith Alliance for Harm Reduction, was not only as a community of practice for faith leaders to be in conversation about how they can build congregations and communities supportive of people who use drugs, but also as a kind of beacon for people who are looking for kind of entree back into welcoming, explicitly welcoming, inclusive congregations, spiritual communities. And again, we do this kind of across a range of traditions. We've got this incredible Islam and harm reduction project we're working on, Judaism and harm reduction project. And so that has been a really key piece. And people who use drugs have been really, I think, kind of significant in helping us do that relationship building in partnership with faith leaders. And so, like, for instance, my congregation, where we're based in New York City, now has an entire worship service that is entirely led by people who use drugs and people who do sex work. Space is given to them by the congregation. They were very clear they wanted it to be in a church space because this was a space they hadn't been welcomed in before, and it was really an important part of reclamation. So thanks for that question.
All right, we are at time. I am going to say thank you for the whole panel. You got off without questions, Adria. Thank you so much for being here and for shaking up our conference. And please move on into, we'll move on into lunch in just a moment, but we're just going to share with you what the transition points are going to be. Anna, over to you.
All right, we are about to take our lunch break, but before we head off to grab our meals, we'd like to give you an overview of the breakout sessions available today. After lunch, we'll dive right into these breakouts so you'll know exactly where to go. In the St. James room, which is right through this set of doors here, we have the AD 101 Essential Components for a Successful Frontline Visit, led by two of our NaRCAD training facilitators, Jackie Travers and Vishal Kinkabwala. This session will take a deep dive into the steps you need to take to conduct a successful one-to-one visit. Whether you're new to AD or you're experienced, please join them in the St. James room. Jackie and Vishal will share their own experiences from the field, and they are both experienced and fabulous educators, so you don't want to miss out on the fun.
Another option you have is to chill with the Dish Arizona team who kicked off our conference this morning so beautifully. They'll be talking about harnessing the power of transparency, vulnerability, and lived experiences to build and enhance the AD relationship. It is a very cool session. That will be in the Copley room. Again, the map is in your program book.
In the Oval Room, which is this room right here, we have Leaning into Not Knowing, Preventing Panic, and Practicing Presence. And this is led by our colleagues at RX Files in Canada. We have Debbie Bunka and Tahira McAleer. In this session, you'll learn how to embrace uncertainty and develop strategies to handle the unknown during detailing visits with confidence and creativity. I know these presenters have some awesome activities lined up, so you don't want to miss this session.
And for those of you tuning in at home, we have the virtual option, which is uncovering the essential ingredients for successful AD visits. This is going to be led by Amy McWeeny of New Hampshire and Brandon Misrock, who presented last year about his work in infectious disease. It's going to be a wonderful session, and if someone who's here in Boston feels like they're missing out, you can always grab a laptop and sneak into a quiet room and join them virtually. But whatever you choose, please enjoy, and please enjoy lunch just back in the Venetian room where you had breakfast, and we will see you later this afternoon after breakouts. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone, both in person and in virtual. I'd like to start by expressing my sincere gratitude to the organizers of NaRCAD conference for the invitation to speak and participate here in Boston. The presentation today presentations here today have been very inspiring. It's a true honor to be part of this gathering of professionals who share a dedication to improving healthcare through effective communication and informed decision-making. My name, as you heard, is Ann-Katrin Berg, and I am the head of RELIS, the Regional Drug Information Center, a section within the Department of Clinical Pharmacology in Trondheim, Norway. An 8-hour flight from Boston. At RELIS, we are dedicated to providing healthcare professionals with reliable evidence-based information on drug therapy to support safer prescribing practices and patient care. Our work aligns closely with the mission of NaRCAD, which makes it especially exciting to be here today and these days to share our insights and experiences. Thank you again for the warm welcome and the opportunity to contribute to this important conversation. I also want to disclose that I have no conflicts of interest or financial disclosure related to this presentation. This presentation is based on the CUP campaign in Norway, which focuses on the better use of migraine medications. Here you see my agenda. I will give you a brief introduction to the CUP program and its role in promoting effective medication use, an outline of our approach to scheduling and organizing visits to GPs, and the campaign Better Use of Migraine Medication, the origins of the campaign and its primary objectives, core messages communicated to healthcare providers regarding migraine treatment, an overview of the campaign's impact and outcome to date, and finally, key takeaways and lessons learned from the campaign. I will also have a presentation of a follow-up study conducted after the CUP campaign, examining the impact and providing further insights into the campaign's effectiveness. This study will be discussed in detail later in this presentation. As you can see, CUP is a collaboration between clinical pharmacology units at University Hospital and RELIS, the regional drug information centers. It started in Trondheim in 2015 and became a national initiative in 2016. In 2018, CUP was formally established as a national organization to ensure consistent and high-quality implementation across all 4 health regions. Since 2023, CUP has been organized under RELIS due to funding logistics, though it remains a collaborative effort between RELIS and the clinical pharmacology departments at Norway's 4 university hospitals. Well, try this. Next slide. Okay, thank you. Can you do it with your finger? Yeah, I can try. No. No. There. Oh, no. It's not easy. Here you can see the CUP timeline, which shows the campaigns over the years. We started in 2015 with the NSAID campaign, and then the antibiotic campaign, and in 2019 we started the opioid campaign, and 2021 and 2022 the menopausal hormone therapy campaign, and 2022 and 2023 the migraine campaign, and the last an ongoing campaign about better use of proton pump inhibitors. Here you see all the brochures and how many GPs we have visit in each campaign. The CUP migraine campaign has received considerable media attention across Norway, which also raised public awareness about the importance of responsible migraine treatment. Through media coverage, we have been able to reach a broader audience and emphasize key messages on safe and effective use of migraine medications. General practitioners can book visits conventionally using a QR code, as you can see on the slide. or through our website, realis.no. Visits are also offered through direct emailing or telephone contact for added convenience. Visit can be conducted either in person or virtually, depending on what works best for the schedule and preferences to the GPs. As we have heard earlier, it's sometimes a knowledge gap. A study revealed that Norwegian GPs had moderate knowledge of the distinctions between acute and prophylactic migraine treatments, as well as how these treatments can contribute to medication overuse headache. So, the education goals was to improve understanding of migraine prevalence, gender differences, and the risk of MOH. To encourage increased use of prophylactic treatments for migraine and to reduce the risk of MOH through better treatment practices. The key messages in the campaign. The PIN code, questions about photophobia, impairment, and nausea, is a practical tool for screening migraine. Every patient with migraine should be offered an acute treatment tailored to their specific symptoms and the effectiveness of previously tried medications. Prophylactic medication for migraine can be initiated directly in general practice. Medication overuse headache is the most common complication of migraine treatment and should be recognized by clinicians. And in women, migraine may be influenced by fluctuations in estrogen levels. Now, a poll. Performing virtual AD visits are easier now than before 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So, which format of detailing has been most successful for your program? Virtual, in person, or a hybrid? No one answering? Should I do something?
So the tech gods are not in our favor today. Let's throw hands up for A.
Virtual?
What about B, in person? And anyone finding success with hybrid? Ooh, hybrid in the house.
Yeah.
And the chat is showing the same trends. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Now to the study. Self-perceived learning outcomes of virtual and in-person academic detailing among general practitioners in Norway. I haven't been part of this study, but I'm going to present it for you. And as you see, the first author here is Jan Schjøtt, who is from Bergen in Western Norway. The study compared learning outcomes from in-person versus virtual academic detailing visits. The GPs evaluated their own learning and development in key areas. A questionnaire was administered both before and after the visits to capture changes in knowledge and skills. The statements addressed was 2 statements focused on assessing overall understanding of migraine management, and 5 statements evaluate specific skills related to pharmacotherapy for migraine. This study flowchart illustrates the participation of GPs in a study on AD conducted in Western Norway between September the 27th and December the 19th in 2022. The chart begins with 167 GPs who received AD either in person, 121 GPs, or virtually, 46 GPs, as you see here. All 167 GPs received electronic questionnaire, Q1 and Q2. Q1 was administered after booking the AD session, and Q2 was given after the AD session was completed. 88 of the GPs, about 53%, completed Q1, and 72 GPs completed Q2. 42 GPs completed both Q1 and Q2, and is now the 100% in this study. 25 of these GPs received in-person AD, and 17 GPs received virtual AD. The final study material comprises the 42 GPs who completed both questionnaires. The electronic questionnaires was questions regarding the respondents' professional background and years of experience, assessment of any prior exposure to academic detailing, and details on the type of academic detailing previously received, whether virtual, in-person, or other formats. In the study, we sent out electronic questionnaires with 5 statements addressing specific knowledge in migraine pharmacotherapy. It was: my knowledge of acute treatment of migraine in adults is good. My knowledge of preventive treatment of migraine is good. My knowledge of medication overuse headache is good. My knowledge of gender differences in migraine is good. And my knowledge of migraine among children is good. The questionnaire had 2 statements addressing general knowledge and skills in migraine treatment. My level of knowledge about treatment of migraine is very good. I feel confident in prescribing drugs for treatment of migraine. The statistical methods used in this study are present here. The 7 Likert items rated by GPs were used to calculate mean composite score before and after AD. The differences between the mean composite score of the 5 items before and after AD reflected the change in perception of specific knowledge in pharmacotherapy of migraine. And the difference between the mean composite score of the 2 items before and after AD reflected the change in perception of general knowledge and skills in migraine. And here is some more statistics in the study we used. I'll go no further into that. The results. The figure you see here displays the change in perception as specific knowledge in pharmacotherapy of migraine among general practitioners. And here, you remember, it was 42, following academic detailing. The change in perception is calculated as the difference between the mean composite score of 5 statements rated before and after AD, using the 7-point Likert scale, ranging from 1, strongly disagree, to 7, strongly agree. Panel A, the first one, represents GPs who received in-person AD, while panel B shows GPs who participated in virtual AD. In both panels, positive changes in perception are represented in blue, while negative changes are shown in red. No change in perception is indicated by a red bar at 0. The results suggest that the majority of GPs reported a positive change in perception, with 84% of in-person AD participants and 88% of virtual. AD participants showing a positive shift, negative changes were minimal, with only 8% of in-person and 12% of virtual AD participants reporting a decline in perception. So the two last figures here illustrates the change in perception regarding general knowledge and skills in pharmacotherapy of migraine among GPs following academic detailing. Also here, the change in perception is calculated as difference between the mean composite score of two statements rated before and after AD, using a 7-point Likert scale ranging from 1, strongly disagree, to 7, strongly agree. Also here, positive changes in blue. Panel A represent GPs who received in-person AD, while panel B shows GPs who participated in virtual AD. The data show that the majority of GPs reported a positive change in perception, with 80% of those receiving in-person AD and 82% of those receiving virtual AD experiencing an increase in general knowledge and skills. Negative changes were minimal, with only 4% of in-person and 12% of virtual AD participants reporting a decrease. These results indicate that both in-person and virtual AD had a positive impact on GPs' perceptions of their general knowledge and skills in migraine pharmacotherapy. The study conclusions. Positive self-perceived learning outcomes were observed in 80 to 88% of the GPs. No significant differences were observed between virtual and in-person academic detailing in terms of learning outcomes. So, our results in this study shows that maybe trusted professionals' relationship in person can be less important to achieve learning outcomes. And at least the conclusion of CUP in general, it is possible to develop a successful intervention program without aiming for higher or lower prescribing rates as the primary goal. The main objective is to provide general practitioners with up-to-date evidence-based drug information, and 90% of the GPs reporting being willing to adjust their prescribing practices based on the information provided. So, thank you for your attention. It has been a pleasure to share the findings from the study conducted as a part of the migraine campaign. I would like once again express my gratitude for the opportunity to present this work and discuss it, the insights gained. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Catherine. Any questions either from our virtual attendees or in person here in Boston? Narissa? Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. One question I have, because it's something we at Illinois Advance are also trying to figure out with our surveys and data, assessing the prescribers or providers' intentions to change their prescribing behaviors. Do you have any ways to measure if they are actually able to do that, or if they have implemented any changes in behaviors after an academic detailing visit, or kind of attributing it to this is the impact of AD?
Okay, if we have observed changes in prescribing, the first campaign, the NSIDE campaign, we did a study and saw that the prescribing then of diclofenac decreased after the AD visits. So we have done some studying about it. I don't remember in detail, but because it's some time ago. But
I guess my question would be also, how do you observe that? Like, for us, we also work with Illinois Medicaid, so there's pharmacy claims data that we could potentially look at. Is there anything like that in Norway where you could to confirm those behaviors that you've observed?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how we did it because I wasn't a part of it, but Harald Langås, I think he did a study about this as a part of his PhD, and I think he has wrote an article, so I can send it to you if you want.
Thank you. We have time for one more.
Thank you. That was excellent. I just want to confirm when providers were signing up for an in-person or virtual academic detailing, was it their choice? Because I know we have a lot of provider preference in our program, so I'm wondering, do you think it's possible to just do one or the other if the providers have such preferences, or is that something that you were testing?
Yeah, you mean if they have the choice of in person or in virtual? Yeah, you saw the QR code. They can book either on the QR code or on our website. I think on that booking, they can choose if they want a in-person visit or they want in virtual. My experience is when we have been visiting a physician for a time, they appreciate that we come back to them and visit them in person. So I think a lot of physicians want us in person. When we are emailing and book by telephone, we offer mostly in person. So then we visit some physicians when we going out and yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ann-Katrin, and thank you for coming all the way from Norway. Your team has been so lovely and gracious in, coming so far and sending just the loveliest humans to Boston for so many years. So thank you for that. All right. So I'm going to out the next person in a way that I think is okay, which is she's very nervous and is being very hard on herself about her English. So I want to say what I said to her this morning, which is, you are already amazing, you're already accepted, we already love you, and your presentation is going to be phenomenal. So without further ado, I am excited to introduce Masayo Komoda. She is the president of the Japanese Society of Academic Detailing. Her presentation is phenomenal. I got a sneak peek at it, and it's also very colorful and a lot of fun. She established the AD Database Division in the Research Department of Tokyo University of Science back in 2013. So she's been doing this work for over a decade, and it's just so clear to see how thoughtful she is and dedicated to her work. So please give it up for Masayo.
Thank you, introduce webbing. My name is Masayo Komoda from Japan. I'm excited to be here. This time, I will give a presentation on the developing the Japan Academic Detailing Training Program, bridging basic pharmaceutical science and clinical practice. There are no conflict of interest to disclose about my presentation. First, project background and introduction. I'll explain the main roles of pharmacists in Japan. I had been working as a pharmacist at a geriatric hospital in Chiba, near Tokyo. For a long time, the role of Japanese pharmacists has traditionally been limited to post-prescription tasks. These tasks include checking prescriptions, contacting with physicians if there are any questions about prescriptions, dispensing and auditing medicines, and providing medication counseling and monitoring for side effects in patients. Furthermore, Japan's medical field have been a top-down society with physicians at the top. In the 2000s, there are push for patient-centered care and the promotion of team-based medicine. However, many hospitals still have physicians as directors, and the culture of not being able to oppose physicians remains strong. In particular, the relationship between physicians in clinic and pharmacists in community pharmacies are often that of master and servant, with pharmacists feeling unable to speak up to physicians. In 2007, the duration of university pharmacy course in Japan was extended from 4 to 6 years in efforts to improve clinical education. At that time, I joined the Faculty of Pharmaceutical Sciences at my alma mater, Tokyo University of Science. Next, intervention and the details of implementation. In 2008, the previous hospital colleague and I had the opportunity to observe the work of clinical pharmacists at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. At the outpatient gastrointestinal clinic, physician, nurse, and pharmacist worked as a team. The pharmacist evaluated the effectiveness of chemotherapy with the physician and registered the next regimen. This is an outpatient breast cancer clinic. The pharmacist prescribed an additional antiemetic medicine, explained the purpose of the prescription to the physician, and obtained the physician's consent. We were surprised by the big difference in the roles of pharmacists in the US and Japan. Thereafter, I visited at MD Anderson Cancer Center every year until 2017. In 2010, we had the opportunity to visit the Methodist Hospital in Texas Medical Center. During our visit, we shadowed a PGY1 pharmacy resident. I was remarkable to see a PGY1 resident with only a year after graduating from pharmacy school, actively making a lot of prescription proposals. This experience highlighted the need for us to rethink and elevate our professional roles and responsibilities. We then wondered how Japanese pharmacists should change. After that, we visited the University of Houston College of Pharmacy every year from 2010 to 2019. I compared the pharmaceutical education in Japan and the US and considered what kind of lifelong learning is necessary to be able to do academic detailing in Japan. In the first and second years, the class hours for basic chemistry and basic physics were slightly longer at our university. But in the fourth year, clinical application of basic pharmaceutical science was slightly longer at Houston. In the third year, critical reading of clinical papers, and in the fifth year, advanced pharmacotherapy for optimal prescription were both unique to Houston. In Houston, the 6-year course was on-site training specialized for clinical practice, while at our university, students were doing graduation research. In 2011, I took the big step of starting prescription support in the outpatient setting once a week, which was being practiced by a young faculty member at the University of Houston College of Pharmacy. This was a role in which I provide prescription support next to the physician in the outpatient clinic, the University Hospital's Breast Cancer Center. The physician told me that pharmacists have a wealth of knowledge about medicines, and that she asked me to provide prescription support from the unique perspective of a pharmacist. Thus, I began considering how the pharmacist perspective differs from the physician's. Let me go over the different perspectives of physicians and pharmacists in this slide. The physician first diagnoses the disease, and guidelines and clinical evidence determine the medicine groups that are recommended as the standard of care for the disease. However, medicines with the same efficacy have different chemical structures, pharmacological and pharmacokinetics features. Furthermore, patients have a variety of backgrounds, such as liver or kidney damage, or they may already be taking other medications. It is possible to select the optimal one from the basic pharmaceutical features of the candidate medicines and the patient background. Therefore, in order to determine the optimal one, the cooperation of pharmacists as well as physicians is necessary. Therefore, Japan's unique definition of academic detailing is a new approach to drug information provision that actively provides comparative information on medicines based on fair and neutral basic and clinical evidence that is not commercial based. In order for pharmacists to become the resource needed to support physicians in prescribing, it was necessary to strengthen the basic pharmaceutical perspective of medicines that only pharmacists can provide. Next, success to share. In 2013, when I was considering whether there was a need to change the education of pharmacists in Japan, I attended a lecture on academic detailing by Professor Michiko Yamamoto. She had visited Professor Jerry Avon and receiving training at NaRCAD, and was introduced academic detailing in Japan for the first time. I had a strong feeling that academic detailing would change the roles of Japanese pharmacists. In 2014, we established the academic detailing department at the Tokyo University of Science. In 2017, we have received some grants and started a lifelong learning academic detailing training program. Furthermore, 2018, we set up the basic academic detailing training program for fourth-year pharmacy students. In 2021, with the help of Professor Michiko Yamamoto, we founded the Japanese Society of Academic Detailing, which took over the lifelong learning program at the Tokyo University of Science. Based on the unique education of the University of Houston College of Pharmacy, we have started a lifelong learning academic detailing training program. Number one, this is a training program to learn about the basic pharmaceutical science, such as the difference in chemical structure formula, pharmacological effects, and pharmacokinetics of medicines. Number two, training that enable critical reading of clinical papers and review from a pharmaceutical perspective. Number three, training to enable clinical decision-making for prescription proposals. Number four, pharmacist to physician communication training is to enable influence on physicians' prescriptions. In the third prescription proposal training, I will introduce how to use the basic pharmaceutical science learned in the first basic pharmaceutical science training. This is a case for a new constipation treatment. In the guidelines for constipation, epithelial function modifying medicines are the most recommended. Although there are two such medicines, lubiprostone and linaclotide, and the guidelines states that they are equally effective. In such a case, which would a pharmacist recommend to a patient with renal dysfunction? In cases where there is a lack of clinical evidence, basic pharmaceutical science can be used to supplement this. Actually, clinical trials evaluating the safety of lubiprostone versus linaclotide in patients with renal dysfunction have not been conducted. Thus, we compare the two from a basic pharmaceutical science perspective. Lubiprostone is similar in structure to alprostadil alpha-dex that have uterine contraction action. Therefore, it is absorbed into the bloodstream and is contraindicated in pregnant women. Linaclotide has a structure consisting of a long chain of amino acid and is not absorbed into the bloodstream. When broken down, only amino acids remain, and they are safe. Based on the above, we recommended linaglutide for patients with renal dysfunction. Next, conclusion. The Japanese Society of Academic Detailing has established the Japan Academic Detailer Certification System. Participant who has at least 5 years of clinical experience and have completed 4 programs are certified as academic detailers. Since 2017, approximately 1,000 people have participated in the academic detailing training program. Currently, there are 135 certified academic detailers. The largest group of certified individuals comes from hospitals, 55%, followed by community pharmacists, 25%, university faculty, 11%, pharmaceutical companies, 5%, and others. Physicians and nurses are cooperating with the training. We were promoting the practice of academic detailing before prescriptions are made in Japan. Through academic detailing, pharmacists are working to influence physicians' prescribing behavior. As a result, pharmacists are becoming more aware of their responsibilities regarding medications. We believe that academic detailing can redefine the role of pharmacists. Lastly, participant engagement elements you will incorporate. The application of basic pharmaceutical science to clinical practice is essential for pharmacists. Clinical faculty members and pharmacists may have forgotten structural formulas and have not kept up to date with biopharmaceutics, as I have experienced. Therefore, it is crucial for them to relearn and update their knowledge in basic pharmaceutical sciences. Additionally, basic science faculty members may overlook real-world pharmaceutical issues. To bridge this gap, they too should make an effort to understand pharmaceutical challenges encountered in medical settings. By learning from each other, clinical and basic science faculty members can collaborate to address pharmaceutical issues from a foundational perspective. This sharing of expertise will deepen the knowledge and skills of pharmacists. We believe that enhancing the expertise of pharmacists will play a key role in advancing the adoption of academic detailing in Japan. Japan has a beautiful Mount Fuji. Please come to Japan at least once. I'll show you around. I study English conversation as hard as I could, but it isn't enough yet. If you could speak slowly when asking questions, that would be helpful. If I still wouldn't understand, I will answer by email later. I'm very grateful for this valuable opportunity. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Masai. Woo! Okay, I know we have some questions in the audience. Let's go to Vishal right here.
Thank you. Do you think academic detailing has influenced doctors' prescribing?
Thank you. Good question. I just prepared this slide. In May 2014, we conducted a survey on the implementation status of academic detailing among 135 academic detailers. Of the academic detailers, only around 40% actually perform academic detailing. One academic detailer had conducted academic detailing for all 280 physicians at the hospital, while the others had implemented for an average of 3 physicians. And of the practicing academic detailers, around 80% think that their academic detailing had influenced the prescriptions of physicians. Of these, 10%, 38% think that their academic detailing had significantly influenced the prescriptions of physicians. 12%, 44% think that the academic detailing had probably influenced the prescription of physicians. And 5%, 19% were unsure. Additionally, all of the academic detailers who were active want to continue practicing academic detailing in the future.
Thank you, Masayo. And we have time for one more question. I think we have Nicole Seymour from Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. I love your presentation. On this slide, what are the reasons you think detailers were not able to do academic detailing?
Thank you. Good question. I just prepared the next slide. Of the academic detailers, 60% were not able to practice academic detailing. The reason include 55% of them are too busy to do it. 68% have no opportunity to do academic detailing with physicians. And 38% are unable to create material for their own institution. And 21% have no confidence to do it. And 12% have no trusting relationship with physicians. It was thought that further training was needed to lead to the practice of academic detailing. I'm here with 3 colleagues. After this, we'd like to learn what is needed to improve our training that lead to do academic detailing. That's all.
Can we have you, Yoko and such, can we have you stand up to say hi to everyone? They came all the way from Japan. Yeah. Thank you so much, Masayo. That was excellent. And let's give it up one more time for Masayo. So well prepared. All right. Well, we had some questions. Thank you for hanging on as we figured out how to get through the next little bit with some of the tech issues. We will be doing one poll and we're going to do another just call it out. So thanks for rolling with us. So excited to pass it over to Anna to introduce Victoria from Toronto.
Last but certainly not least, we have our final speaker of the day, Victoria Burton from the Centre for Effective Practice in Canada. Victoria is a manager and leads planning, implementation, and evaluation of the CEP's academic detailing service. She joined CEP in 2017, and her expertise in project management, knowledge translation, and change management has been key to their success. Please welcome Victoria.
Hello. I am very honored to be up here as part of a Global Perspectives panel, although it's kind of ironic because I think my flight here from Toronto is probably shorter than a lot of those Americans in the room, so interesting, but I'm not complaining. Today I'm going to be sharing some work that we've been doing at CEP to try to streamline access to some of our tools and supports for clinicians in Ontario. So that's me. Disclosure, the bangs are new, the shirt is the same, which is a little embarrassing. I'm an employee of the CEP. NaRCAD graciously allowed me to be here to speak to you all, and no other conflicts of interest. So here's my poll. I'm going to be talking to you today about some work that is related to electronic medical records. So I just wanted to get a sense of, as part of your detailing, how many of you are discussing how to use the tools and functions of an EMR or EMR tools to optimize care?
All right. Throw your hands up if you do discuss or have used EMR or EHR tools in your academic detailing. All right. Got about 5 or 6 folks. I'm going to guess this is a big one. Anyone saying no? No? Okay.
Maybe
sometimes. There we go. There's the majority. How about we haven't, but we want to? D. All right. Fair show of hands. And it looks like on the virtual side of things, it's a mixed bag. We have some people who very much have so far, and we have folks who want to learn how to do it. And we have one person, Elizabeth from Maine, saying, not even my CMOs don't know how to harness the power of their EMR tools. So back to you, Victoria.
So that's kind of very in line with this presentation. I think that EMRs are very complex and they require a lot of different skills that we may not possess as academic detailing teams. So yeah, don't feel alone in that. Okay, so just a little bit of background on CEP and our academic detailing service. CEP, we're a not-for-profit organization located in Ontario, Canada. And our mission is to close the gap between evidence and practice. And we do that through offering a variety of knowledge translation initiatives, one of them, of course, being our academic detailing service. So we have a team of 6 pharmacists, these lovely people on the screen here, who provide academic detailing across the province of Ontario. We also have family health teams in Ontario, which are groups of family physicians, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, and other allied health professionals. And we partnered with 4 family health teams across southern Ontario to provide academic detailing within their teams. We also, just to ensure that all clinicians across the province have access to this service, each of our 6 detailers have kind of a second region that they cover, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person, depending on the location. And yeah. So like I mentioned, we have both in-person and virtual visits. Used to be all in person. With COVID, obviously everything went virtual, and now we kind of offer both, which is nice because we get to expand access to the service. We typically do 2 new topics per year, keeping around 5 or 6 going at one time. Right now we have an all-time high of 7 available, which is too much, I will admit. And we're able to provide CME credits to family physicians for participating in our service. So we typically get funding from the Ministry of Health in 2 to 3 year chunks. So this is kind of a snapshot of our history of the topics we've provided support on. So starting in long-term care back in 2014, and then pivoting to support primary care with the opioid crisis in 2017, which is really where our current service got its start. 2020 came around, and we were really hoping to focus on a couple of less intense topics. The pandemic had different plans for us. We covered managing primary care during COVID-19, which was very interesting. Moved on to a couple other emerging needs and provincial priorities. And that brings us to 2022 to 2024, which is kind of basically where we're at today. So you see we have 4 very large, complex chronic conditions that we're covering at the time, and we've since added obesity medications as well. So kind of the moral of the story here is that we've offered a variety of topics, but we're always trying to support clinicians where they need it the most and address provincial priorities. We want to obviously make sure that we're providing a service that is both valued and effective. So we send post-visit surveys after visits to get information on satisfaction, increases in confidence, as well as feedback on the service, suggestions for improvement, and examples of things that clinicians learned and are going to implement into practice. We also work with an evaluation scientist to look at pharmacy claims data, which is a really great benefit that we have, to compare changes in prescribing behavior among participants in our AD service and matched controls in the province. So this is just some of the key findings that we've had from our quite old now opioid-related and benzodiazepine topics. And so great, we've been operating this service since 2017. We're sort of a well-oiled machine at this point. We know that we're well-received, we're effective in changing behavior, but that just wasn't enough. There's been, over the past few years, quite a lot of discussion and talk about how there's a need for increased digital health support and the use of EMRs and EMR tools to optimize care. And as I mentioned, CEP is, we offer a variety of initiatives to help with knowledge translation. And so, in 2022, we received funding to collaborate with a digital health organization in Ontario, which is the eHealth Centre of Excellence, tiny little thing on the bottom, to provide another initiative called Evidence to Practice Ontario. And the purpose of Evidence to Practice was to develop easy-to-use digital tools to embed up-to-date evidence right into the kind of 3 big EMR platforms that were being used across Ontario. And then along with these EMR tools, we provided implementation supports, one of them being our existing academic detailing service. So you can see the topics of the EMR tools align with the topics that we addressed in our most recent contract, as well as digital implementation support called Change Management Specialists from the eHealth Centre of Excellence. So I'm going to give you a snapshot of the tools. I was not involved in the development of the tools. I am certainly no expert, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of sense of what they look like. So this is a screenshot from the Depression and Anxiety Disorders tool. So this is the screening page. Screening tools like the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7 are embedded right into the tool. So you can click on them and they'll pop up. And then scores to these screening tools can be plotted over time to see trends. And then this is the medication module. There's decision aid kind of pop-ups that help with things like considerations for special populations. So here, pregnant and postpartum patients, as well as talking points to use with patients. And then there's ways to track medication adherence and response, like side effects and things like that. Okay, so what's the problem? We know that our academic detailing supports distilling the evolving evidence on these topics and helping clinicians navigate all of the emerging resources for both themselves and their patients. We have these fantastic new digital tools to address the need for kind of digital tools and optimizing EMRs. We also have change management specialists to help kind of fill the gap of the lack of technical skill among clinicians and their teams and help with the practical implementation of these tools. But these are 2 different supports offered by 2 different people from 2 different organizations, but for the same project and the same tool. It's very confusing and it leads to a lot of navigation burden for the clinician. So how do we make sure that clinicians have access to these supports and this tool without feeling burdened by navigation? Our solution was a fancy term we like to use, one-door policy. And through this one-door policy, the goal was really to connect clinicians to the services that they needed without them having to do any of the work. So a healthcare provider, they sign up for support, whether through our academic detailing service, through a change management specialist, or through a central intake form for the Evidence to Practice program. They immediately get access to both change management specialists for technical implementation support and our academic detailers for clinical education. So it seems simple enough, but it really is not. How we first went about this, in the very, very early stages, we did a cross-training of the change management specialists and our academic detailers, so they would get kind of an understanding of what each other's support looked like and what it involved. We also, as part of our tool development, the detailers were going through training on the topic at the same time that the EMR tools were being developed, so we would get detailer feedback on the EMR tools during development, and then when the tool was finished, the detailing team would get a demo of the final tool so that when they were out in the field, they had a baseline understanding of what was included in the tool and what providers could do with it. And then I think the biggest part of our first attempt was through our recruitment. So we had a list of early adopters, or people who had initially expressed interest in the EMR tools. We shared that with our detailers to identify any existing relationships that we could leverage. In the actual recruitment emails themselves, we had the recruitment emails came from the change management specialist, but they included the ask of here's the tool, here's change management, and here's detailing. You can get all three. And it also CC'd the relevant detailer. From that point on, we used email handoffs whenever a clinician expressed interest in one or the other. And then we tracked in both of our, luckily we both use Salesforce, and we tracked tool downloads, change management, support visits, and academic detailing visits, and we shared monthly reports and manually updated each other's Salesforces. There were many challenges that came about with this initial attempt. So one of the big ones was conflicting timelines. Timelines both in terms of the detailers' training not aligning well with the tool development, so that when we were eliciting their feedback in the tools, they hadn't gone through training or enough training yet to really be able to provide the feedback that we needed. And also sometimes the tool wasn't available when our detailers started going out with the education. So they didn't have something that they could actually provide clinicians yet. There also was limited time during an academic detailing visit to even mention an EMR tool. I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges, is there's so much, especially with topics like heart failure and diabetes and anxiety and depression in one topic, there's not really time to breathe, nevertheless, talk about an EMR tool. So that was a big challenge. There was a lot of complexity with sharing information. Our Salesforces had mixed-matched information in terms of what clinics providers were attached to, what detailer was the right detailer to include on the email, and sometimes we didn't have accurate, up-to-date information on who had already received the detailing visit, so that was a little bit complicated. And the recruitment emails being sent had just way too many asks. So we're trying to reduce navigation burden for the clinician, but we kind of went too far in one direction and just said, here's everything that you can have, do it all. So that didn't work. And then the last one was just bad communication. One, internal communication between the field teams, the change management specialists, and academic detailers. We didn't have any set up opportunities for them to continue to engage throughout the process. So after that first training session, that was kind of it, and that didn't work well. There was also poor communication and operationalization. I don't know why I would choose to use that word in a presentation. Of the handoff process. We didn't really have anything documented well. we really didn't communicate well with the detailers or the change management specialists, what they were supposed to document in Salesforce, who was supposed to do the follow-up and when. We just kind of missed a lot of those details. And then also lack of consistent messaging, so poor communication with clinicians. There was 2 different websites for the Evidence to Practice program. There was no place where there was clear descriptions of both services, change management and detailing. And we also didn't really have any good communications material to share, so really missed the mark on that part. So, our second attempt. First, better documentation. So to improve the availability of information, of tool downloads, academic detailing visits, and change management visits, we started to use a third-party software to support automatic data sharing between our Salesforces to limit the amount of manual manual updating of Salesforces that we had to do. A work in progress is better documentation of the process, as well as email templates for everyone to use when speaking about the other service, and promotional material to use when cross-promoting. Also have tried to improve communication and engagement opportunities for the detailers and change management specialists, so having a monthly meeting where everyone comes together, and also facilitating shadowing opportunities, and encouraging joint in-person days where they kind of show the tool, they do change management, and they do detailing to like a group practice. And enhanced outreach. So we've kind of cut the super jumbo email. Change management specialists do their outreach for the tool and their service. We do warm handoffs still, and then we supply the academic detailers with a list of clinicians who have downloaded a tool but haven't had detailing yet. I will say these are all still very much a work in progress. Looking forward, a lot of lessons learned through this, many errors that we're learning from. One is just plan well in advance. I think that we didn't do enough planning in the beginning of this program, so we had to plan a lot as we went, which no program is ever perfect the first try, but we had, I think, not done enough planning. Include the right people. So I think, include the academic detailing team in the kind of big picture things, and then include the academic detailers, no pun intended, in figuring out the details of, like, how is this actually going to work based on what you're doing. And also focus on the right things. As I said, we kind of focused on the, big picture and trying to make this a very seamless process, but we didn't actually focus on the things that mattered, like supplying the detailers with the information and the materials that they needed to do this. Clarify and set realistic deliverables. This is kind of twofold. One, obviously the purpose of these supports was to help with the implementation of these tools, but also we want to drive up active use of the tools. Like, we have deliverables for our funders. Are the detailers the right people to drive up active use of the EMR tool? No, probably not, and we didn't really think about that. So it ended up being that the deliverable was that they had to have the tool before they got detailing. So again, it didn't make sense for the detailers to do the outreach. And keep it simple. We tried to overcomplicate this, and I think we kind of got into the weeds, and now we have to take a step back. I know I'm coming up to my time, so I've also listed some other areas that we want to explore improving in the future, as well as continuing to improve the things that we've already implemented in this kind of second attempt. And that's it. Thank you. And so I'm not a detailer myself, so I want to invite Nicole and Trish, my colleagues, up to join me for this Q&A period, because a lot of your questions might be better suited to go to them.
Thanks, Victoria. Any questions from our audience here in Boston or our virtual attendees? You're getting some praise in the chat box, by the way, Victoria. Great presentation.
Just curiosity, is this something embedded within the EMR, or is this a separate EMR creation that you guys have?
So The tools are created by the digital health organization that we partner with to be installed into the EMR. So once they're in there, there's a toolbar along the top, and it just clicks and opens the tools. So they're embedded once they're installed.
So it's up to the prescriber's office discretion to see if they want to add that within their EMR?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Adrian. Any other questions? We have one right here.
Thank you. So my question is, you said that you use Salesforce. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on how you're using that?
Ooh.
Is it customized?
It's very customized. So Salesforce is very much made to be a sales platform, a CRM for a sales company. We use it very much to track, so we have accounts and contacts to track all of the providers and the clinics that we visit, but we also, I would say, primarily use it to track the actual visits. So anytime a detailer has a visit, they go in and create a visit. They include information on how much time they spent on their key messages. They include information on like questions that the provider had, barriers that they mentioned, and practice changing behaviors that the detailers kind of shared with them. And then we also use it to automate the survey that gets sent out after the visit.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question just to ask of Trish and Nicole, or Nicole. When you go in to have sessions where you're talking about something more technical like this, what do you feel like is the most common sort of either defensiveness or rejection or objection that comes up or was during this process? And please feel free to step up to the podium. Thank you.
Sure. So just to further clarify your question, what happened was we'd have this boundary of saying, if this came up in a visit with us, if someone expressed an interest, or if we heard them say something that the EMR tool would be a solution for, we'd say, hey, we've got this tool. You can install it into your EMR. Here's a rough view of what you can do with it. If you're interested, I'll connect you with a technical person who's the expert there. So we're careful to not get drawn into too much of a technical discussion. We'd have a certain demo of the tool. We'd know what it could do. We'd know roughly how it worked, but we couldn't troubleshoot. So we'd be pretty quick to just kind of stop there. But in terms of, did that answer your question? Are we also looking?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
No, that's great, and that's where my mind went, is as a detailer, did you have to suddenly learn, all of this back IT kind of training to be able to do this? Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions in the room?
So just to piggyback on that last question, at least in my experience, providers really love a great resource that they can just use immediately. Did you find that having that resource improved your buy-in from providers for the other detailing messages, or did it seem to impact it at all?
I think there was a really wide range of interest in the EMR tools at all. I think, at least in Ontario, there have been a lot of promises made about clinical tools that exist and are going to help with practice. So with the physicians and clinics that I spoke with, there was a lot of skepticism because they had tried other things and other tools that had made similar promises in the past, and it hadn't worked out necessarily the way that they had dreamed. So it kind of depended on the provider's experience, and some of them were very, very excited about it. And a lot of the times they would say, you know what, we need to run this by our IT person or our digital lead. They'd have one person at the clinic that would be kind of responsible for screening those types of things. And others would say, you know what, we've already tried things. It takes a lot of time to learn a new tool and use it properly, and we just don't have the time or the interest to change our practice the way that we would need to. So a really, really wide range.
We have time for one more question, if anyone has one. Oh, Adrian has one more. Great.
This is just more curiosity. Is there a fee associated with the practices to have this?
No.
And are they incentivized to do so?
Yeah, so I mean, we hope that the services and the product are the incentivization, but also for change management and academic detailing, physicians can get Main Pro credits, which is our CME in Ontario, in Canada.
And we have one more question over here if we have time.
Yes, certainly.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I was just curious if for future iterations, this offered you any opportunity to collect data using like the software.
Yeah, I can't speak to this in too much detail because I'm not super involved in that part of the evidence to practice portion, but I know that there is like usage analytics in the EMRs, and depending on opt-in, you can collect information on, like we have download data from the platform that the tools are downloaded from in our Salesforces. But if they opt in to share user analytics, we can see like active use, like how many times someone opens the tool and things like that. But it kind of depends on what permission they give.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for so many thoughtful questions, and please give it up for Trish, Victoria, and Nicole from CEP.